Chapter 95, Desperate Fight. Chapter 95, Desperate Fight. There was a huge star river in the sky, which was exactly like the pattern formed in the Yin Valley by the sky snake's blood. In that star river, every star was as big as a mountain, and the distance between the stars was like heaven and earth, hundreds of thousands of meters away. Under the star river were various numerous clouds, floating freely, and which were either formed of fire, yin qi, or poisonous air. Grey sky and grey earth. On the ground lay a huge statue with its back on the ground. The statue was of a muscular, handsome figure, and sculpted to be clothed with only a stone shorts. The heart area of the stone statue was shining with starry light. The starry light was attracting the power in the star river, and similarly to the light from the starry river was becoming concentrated in the heart of the stone statue. The statue was carved very expertly, such that even the hair and veins were shown in exquisite delicacy. If one looked carefully, one could even see thousands of black spots moving through the veins. On the right palm of the stone statue, a little ant was staring up at the sky with a surprised look. That was Shi Yang. After he arrived here, he was standing on the right palm of the statue, with oddly swaying plants all around him. Those plants, which swayed with the wind, were 10 meters high, and as thick as a human waist, looking like the statue's hair. Although he didn't know that the plants looked like hair from up in the air. In his eyes, the right palm of that statue was 10 times larger than the Godstone Square in Tianyun City. Standing on that palm, Shi Yang looked at the mysterious star river above him and was filled with amazement. He wasn't aware that he was on the palm of statue, nor did he know how huge the statue was. He had lost his sense of direction and was of the assumption that he was on a small hill. 2. The yin pearls in the Tian-Q, Shen-Q, and Yin-Du meridians suddenly started spinning, while a mysterious attraction force came from the heart of that stone statue. Shi Yang's body shook suddenly. The heart area which attracted the starlight was calling for the yin pearls inside Shi Yang, and the yin pearls spun, as if urging him to go to the heart area. Standing on the palm of the stone statue, Shi Yang looked quite serious, and after a little hesitance, he dashed to the heart area of the statue directly. Meanwhile, the small black men on the stone statue observed for a while, and realized the heart area was the most powerful place. Therefore, after being still for a while, those people gathered at the chest of the stone statue. Those people included the warriors from the Dark World, Mu Hui, Mu Yu Dai, Di Yalan, and Beiming Ce. All warriors under the Earth Realm were moving towards the heart area. Under the heels of the stone statue, Beiming Shong, Kai Xiao, Jua Qi, the Dark Master, Yin Kuei, and Zhu Shan were suppressed by a huge power. Warriors above Earthrealm were all suppressed under its heels, unable to move even a bit. At that time, the group including Beiming Shong and Kai Xiao were trying to defend against the power which restrained them. But, however hard they tried, they couldn't get rid of that pressure or move an inch. 2. The yin pearls inside Shi Yang kept spinning, while Shi Yang held his breath and dashed toward the stone statue with a rigid face. Beside Shi Yang, the hairs of the stone statue were swaying like tall trees and blocking his sight. He felt like he was in a jungle instead of the palm of the statue. Not knowing how much time had passed, Shi Yang finally flew from the mountain-like palm to its right leg. Shi Yang's rushing body suddenly stopped as he looked ahead on alert. From a deep hole in front of him, one after another flaming stone men suddenly jumped out. These stone men were 3 meters tall and were wreathed in fire, giving off the smell of the 9-headed sky snake. If one looked down at it from upon the statue, he would find that that deep hole was actually the Yang Kai meridian on its right arm. The 12 flaming stone men seemed to be disgusted by the smell of life. Once Shi Yang approached the hole, they appeared and jumped on him. Taking a deep breath, Shi Yang kept calm to operate his petrification martial spirit, and his skin turned dark brown in a short time. After he operated his petrification martial spirit, Shi Yang triggered the by moving his profound qi all over his body. As the was formed, Shi Yang dashed out like a missile. Dang dang dang. Among the flaming stone men, Shi Yang turned his fingers into spears and struck the stone men. Which could pierce through an elementary realm warrior, emitted the sound of metal clashing while striking the stone bodies. The power of the fire went into Shi Yang's fingers when he touched the stone men, and felt pain in his fingers. No. His face changed, Shi Yang soon realized that there was inefficient when facing the stone men who were not made of flesh. Boom! 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 6 stone men made flaming fists and punched Shi Yang together. His couldn't bear the attacks and fell apart. Under those fists, Shi Yang was driven back in pain, his clothes were on fire. Thanks to his petrification martial spirit, his body was not hurt except for some pain. With a gloomy face, Shi Yang could figure out that every one of the 6 stone man was tougher than a human realm warrior. That was not working. He had to take another shot. As his will changed, Shi Yang's left hand gave out wisps of white smoke. Negative energy was triggered and combined with his profound qi. They flew out together and formed a huge. With his will, they moved swiftly and suddenly fell in the center of the stone men. A strong power of attraction gushed out of the field, making all the stone men to struggle painfully. It worked. Delighted, Shi Yang enhanced the power in the field and focused to twist it. Pa! 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 As the field span, one stone man was shattered into pieces and was thrown out of the field. Shi Yang was a little relieved before his face changed again. However, after leaving the field, the scattered parts of the stone man began to reform together. In merely 3 seconds, it had recombined and jumped at Shi Yang again. It was not killed. Realizing that, Shi Yang's face turned gloomier, and he triggered the field again to change its position. That stone man was wrapped again and shredded to pieces another time. This time, Shi Yang didn't try to kill them, but crossed the field in an instant and continued to dash forward after all the stone men were entangled. Half an hour later, from the deep hole of the stone statue's Jigo meridian, one after another yin sha danced out. Yin sha was produced by warriors' spirits which absorbed yin qi. It was a dead thing, but could use part of the warrior's martial spirit. It was aggressive and in thirst of more spirits. Those yin sha waved their claws and flew toward Shi Yang from the deep hole. After a glance at the yin sha, Shi Yang's face turned cold. Inside the yin pearl, wisps of yin power pervaded and triggered the 3 yin swirls to spin, and a strong power of attraction broke out. Those yin sha suddenly showed fear and escaped to the deep hole. You think you can escape? Shi Yang smiled coldly, and the yin swirls span even faster. The yin sha struggled hard while being pulled by Shi Yang's yin swirls, but still forced towards Shi Yang little by little. The more they approached Shi Yang, the more they were influenced by the yin swirl. All of a sudden, one yin sha stopped struggling and turned into yin qi and went inside Shi Yang's chest. The yin sha dissolved in the yin swirls and turned into pure energy which was attached to the center of the yin swirls. The rest of the yin sha struggled in fear but couldn't escape the yin swirls. They were pulled in and turned into yin qi inside of it. Quickly, all the yin sha were absorbed and Shi Yang continued advancing. At the same time, the same thing was happening at every corner of the stone statue. Beiming Ce, Mu Yu Dai, Di Yalan, Mu Hui, and warriors from the dark world also met danger when they headed for the heart. They were all trapped by the flaming stone men, yin sha, poisonous demons, and mud dragons which came from the meridians of the stone statue. Shi Yang continued to rush forward. On his way, he came across more flaming stone men and yin sha, which were taken care of by the same means, and then he came to the right elbow slowly. Shi Yang stopped again. Ahead of him were 5 warriors from the dark world, who all were around the first or second sky of the human realm. They had been separated from the others by the gate of heaven when they entering. And now, all of them were heading for the heart but smelled like scorched flesh. The 5 warriors from the dark world also spotted Shi Yang. They turned back, glanced at Shi Yang, and came to an agreement silently. With cold eyes, they walked towards Shi Yang slowly. Warriors from the dark world? Shi Yang's eyes were like torches as he spotted the sign of the dark world on the bare shoulder of one warrior. Kill! That guy yelled when the rest separated to encircle Shi Yang in an arc. You are seeking for death. With a cold face, Shi Yang's eyes showed a bloodthirst. After a shout, he dashed out like a sharp sword. Dash! Chapter 96, Kill All the Way. Chapter 96, Kill All the Way. With white smoke engulfing him, Shi Yang's thoughts were all about bloodthirst, brutality, insanity, and terror while under the effect of the negative energy. There was only a single desire, and that was to kill them all. Standing amid the 5 warriors from the dark world, Shi Yang had a rigid face. One after another magic snakes made of negative energy tried to intertwine those warriors crazily. Bang! One dark world warrior scratched Shi Yang's chest. Hee hee. Shi Yang chuckled cunningly as he kicked that warrior bluntly. His 10 fingers were like spears and left 10 bloody holes on the warrior's chest in an instant. With that guy's miserable screams, Shi Yang stepped back and blocked another attack from another warrior's green light to his head. 3 formed quietly on his 2 sides and his back. Standing amid the 3, Shi Yang looked at the 5 dark world warriors coldly. Want to kill me? Hee hee. I want to kill you too. Kill. Those dark world warriors yelled and rushed forward together. The warrior who got 5 blood holes in his chest suddenly sat down cross-legged. Green thorns were triggered by him and shot from his palms. Profound level martial skill. Dozens of icy, needle-like thorns flashed through the air toward Shi Yang like lightning. Dang 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 dang. The crisp sound of metal on metal came from all over Shi Yang's body as the couldn't break Shi Yang's petrification martial spirit. The badly injured man's pale face changed as he ordered, "Strike together." The other 4 warriors went to the 4 corners while Shi Yang was at the center point. 4 blue curtains appeared from above their heads like clouds and formed together before they thrust toward Shi Yang. The blue curtains had so strong power that they bound Shi Yang in an instant. The 4 warriors were delighted as they jumped up and took out weapons to stab Shi Yang. "Field. Trigger," Shi Yang shouted. The 4 warriors were inside the invisible and were wrapped by them all of a sudden. Being greatly distorted, the 4 warriors turned stiff and couldn't even operate their profound chi. Deeply horrified, they didn't know what exactly had happened. "Howl!" Shi Yang shouted into the sky, his muscles trembling. At the same time, the white smoke became denser and all sorts of negative energies were triggered. In an instant, a vicious power broke out inside Shi Yang's body and flashed through his body like an electric current. In the howls, Shi Yang managed to break through the blue curtain. Boom! A huge roar came, and the big blue curtain made from the 4 smaller ones exploded into blue light spots. Shi Yang smiled cunningly and coldly, and rushed into one and thrust his into the warrior contained within. Pu8. Shi Yang's was thrust into the eyes of the warrior entangled in the field. His eyes turned into 2 blood holes and even his brain could be seen. He died instantly. Shi Yang moved swiftly, crossing into the other 2 fields. Pu8. 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 The other 3 warriors were also bleeding from their eyes and died in the same way, in a very short time. The suddenly contracted. The last dark world warrior sitting on the ground was terrified and hurriedly tried to escape. "Do you really think you can run away?" Shi Yang laughed coldly, while he flashed to the warrior and stabbed him in the back. His arm went right through the man's heart. Right now, all the 5 dark world warriors were killed. Covered in blood, Shi Yang stood beside the 5 corpses, looking content. He was enjoying the negative energy flowing out from them. Soon, the 5 bodies dried up, while Shi Yang's meridians were filled with profound qi and his desire for blood surge. Without any attempt to suppress the effects, Shi Yang kept activated while his desire to kill was strengthened. He walked to the heart area. Half an hour later, another 2 warriors of the second sky of the nascent realm encountered him. Without uttering any word, Shi Yang dashed over with a hideous face. Under the bloodthirsty effects of, he killed the 2 warriors easily and continued his journey. 12 yin sha suddenly flew up from a deep hole ahead when they saw Shi Yang. Hee hee. Shi Yang chuckled coldly but in a happy mood. He shifted his yin swirls and a huge attraction force came into being. The 12 yin sha were eventually swallowed by Shi Yang's yin swirls and turned into yin qi. All sorts of negative energy was purifying and gushing out of Shi Yang's meridians. Ignoring the abnormal state of his body, Shi Yang kept advancing. All along the way, Shi Yang became a god of slaughter as he killed instantly as long as he saw a Dark World warrior. The Dark World warriors in this area were mostly at the 3rd sky of the nascent realm or the 1st or 2nd sky of the human realm. They couldn't compete with Shi Yang and were all killed by him. All along the way, Shi Yang killed 21 Dark World warriors, absorbed 65 yin sha and finally reached the right shoulder of the stone statue. Mu Hui's figure suddenly popped out from a deep hole ahead. Beside him stood 3 dark world warriors of the 3rd sky of the human realm. Inside the deep hole, 3 destroyed mud dragons were wriggling, trying to reconstruct their bodies. Mu Hui frowned and a slight resignation flashed across his odd face. These things are too tough and can't be killed. There are hundreds of them in every deep hole which keeps consuming my profound chi. Young master, someone's there. A dark world warrior pointed to Shi Yang. Shi Yang was surrounded by white smoke and a murderous air boiled around him. The blood on him turned into blood cocoons while he smiled a bloody smile. It's you. Mu Hui was surprised and recognized he was Shi Yang, who always stood beside Han Feng and Ku Long. While Mu Hui was in the Yin Valley, he had observed but didn't pay much attention to Shi Yang. Rather, he was more focused on the experts like Jua Qi and Xia Xinyang. Since Shi Yang was only at the 1st sky of the human realm, Mu Hui never took him seriously. Seeing Shi Yang approaching with a murderous air, Mu Hui was perplexed, not knowing what happened to Shi Yang. Young master, we have to kill whoever we meet. That warrior wore a plain expression. The earlier we kill one, the earlier we have less adversaries. The mistress of the dark world has ordered that we even have to kill Beiming Ce if we met him. One of you stay and take care of him. The rest follow me. Mu Hui nodded and ordered, then turned to walk ahead. 2 warriors followed Mu Hui quietly and left at once. That talkative guy stayed there, looking at Shi Yang coldly. You have bad luck. Bad luck? Shi Yang laughed wildly. Actually, I have rather good luck. Really good. You dark world warriors fed me well. Hihi, I have killed 21 dark world warriors. And you will be my 22nd. Just then, Shi Yang rushed towards him. 2 minutes later, that talkative warrior turned into a dry dead body, his head and body separated. Shi Yang sucked up his negative energy and continued to run up. 10 minutes later, Shi Yang saw Mu Hui and the other 2 warriors again. What? Li Tuo was killed by you? Mu Hui then took Shi Yang seriously and his face turned dignified. A 1st sky of the human realm killed Li Tuo, who was at the 3rd sky. It seems you are something. Shi Yang didn't answer, but smiled coldly. His desire for blood was increasing rapidly as he walked towards Mu Hui step by step. Mu Hui was at the 3rd sky of the human realm, but since he had a martial spirit and trained in high-class martial skills, he was more capable than the average warrior of his level. Shi Yang approached him step by step, but although he looked vicious and insane, he was actually cool-minded. After 5 steps, he acutely perceived that Mu Hui was a formidable adversary. You are already dead. Mu Hui stared at him and yelled. You are already dead. The 4 words struck into Shi Yang's mind like some mysterious incantation. An astounding power suddenly exploded in Shi Yang's mind. The 4 words conquered his perception and stopped all his thoughts. Kill him. So bored. Mu Hui ordered indifferently, and shook his head, before he walked forward quickly. The 2 warriors walked towards Shi Yang with dull expressions and stabbed Shi Yang with the swords in their hands. Dang! Dang! The sound of metal clashing came from Shi Yang's chest again. Millimeter! The 2 warriors' faces changed and they started to trigger more profound chi in their swords, then raised them to stab Shi Yang's eyes. The strong strikes on his chest suddenly woke him up from his confused state. In his eyes, 2 tips of sharp swords were expanding slowly. Surprised, Shi Yang shifted his head and the swords slipped past his temple. He could feel the coldness on the swords clearly. Bang! Bang! A boiling negative energy exploded from Shi Yang's shoulders. 2 bunches of pale light delved into the 2 warriors' bodies in an instant. Struck by the negative energy, the 2 warriors felt like they were being dragged into an endless blood sea and were being eaten by thousands of ghosts. They were dumbstruck. Pew! Pew! 5 bloody holes appeared on their necks and blood came gushing out. Shi Yang looked on coldly as he tossed the blood on his fingers, absorbed the profound chi in them. He coldly glanced at Mu Hui, who was moving, and dashed forward. Chapter 97, Grind. Chapter 97, Grind. Shi Yang appeared again. This time, Mu Hui's expression became serious and his seductive eyes flickered with some coldness. He bitterly watched Shi Yang, who was walking towards him step by step. 3 human realm warriors were individually killed by Shi Yang. especially the last two, who died after he used his soul martial spirit on Shi Yang. You're not bad. Mu Hui slowly took a deep breath. The result is still going to be the same though. You will still die in my hands. Shi Yang's expression was slightly ferocious. The negative energies in all of his meridians were churning like waves, and wisps of pale white fog covered his whole body. The different negative emotions were rampaging throughout his body. These violent and murderous thoughts formed a dominating will around his body. The will was like an evil spirit that could destroy everything in its path. However, his mentality was clear and calm as ever. Under the conditions of, Shi Yang became very sensitive. He could feel the most minuscule details of the different essences in this bizarre world. He could even feel the circulation path of the profound qi in Mu Hui's body, the soul martial spirit. This was the most mysterious kind of martial spirit. Warriors with the soul martial spirit had the most formidable senses, with the power to delude people's minds with their speech. Their insight into the natural energies was also a lot broader than ordinary warriors. What Mu Hui had was precisely the soul martial spirit. Once he breaks into the nirvana realm and forms a sea of knowledge inside his mind, the soul martial spirit would become even stronger. One sentence would have the power to drive people to madness and put them into a situation beyond redemption. Previously, with one sentence from Mu Hui, Shi Yang was put into a suspended dream, in which his body became cold and stiff. If it weren't for the negligence of those two Dark World warriors, he could have already ended up dead back there. And because of that, this time when Shi Yang sprinted forward, the first thing he did was to securely guard his mind, as he didn't dare give another chance for Mu Hui to use the soul martial spirit to paralyze his mind again. The Shi family's petrification martial spirit sure is something. It looks like those two weren't able to kill you in one shot, and that's what woke you up. Mu Hui looked at the sword gash on the clothes on Shi Yang's chest. His long, thin eyes slightly squinted, and a seductive light suddenly shone from his eyes. That beam of seductive light became brighter and brighter. Then slowly, Mu Hui's eyes became like bright and dazzling gems under the sun. A flow of deluding mental power was released from those eyes. This mental power was like an invisible storm that suddenly covered the whole area. Lock! Mu Hui shouted. Shi Yang's whole body stiffened and his eyes became dazed again. The profound qi in his body behaved as if it was frozen and became hard to circulate. Mu Hui raised his right arm and green electric light shot from his 5 fingers, which quickly condensed under his control. Soon, a long knife formed in his hand, shining with a strange green light. The long knife looked like it was real and gave off a dazzling and chilling bright light. Holding there was a confident smile on Mu Hui's lips. He slowly walked towards Shi Yang as if taking a casual stroll. Lub-dub, lub-dub. At Shi Yang's chest, the yin pearls continuously pulsed. Summoned by the strange light spots at the stone statue's heart, the yin pearls in his meridians became more and more restless. The traumatized Shi Yang suddenly felt a strange movement in the yin pearls. His soul felt as if it was in an endless dark abyss. It was sinking quickly, like it was going to be swallowed by the abyss and could never have its own individual thought again. Suddenly, the negative energies fiercely burst from the meridians in his head. Feelings of bloodlust, madness, and hate quickly flowed into the abyss, and entered the mind of Shi Yang as it was falling into the dark abyss. Boom! His head suddenly shook, and Shi Yang's degrading mind was forcibly cleared by the negative energies. What? Mu Hui immediately noticed the change. He exclaimed, and the in his hand swung down without hesitation. BZZ, BZZ, BZZ. The air exploded wherever the went. And in its glowing green light, the became thinner and thinner, almost as thin as an onion skin. After Shi Yang was wide awake, he saw the coming straight at him. His heart shook and without hesitation he dodged to the left. Pu. A beam of electric light flashed, and a deep bloody gash appeared on Shi Yang's right arm. What sort of power was affixed to the knife that it was able to break his petrification martial spirit? Shi Yang's expression suddenly changed. Mu Hui's eyes were also full of surprise. His expression became more serious, and said, "Not bad, this slash only left a gash and didn't chop your whole arm off." The petrification martial spirit from the Shi family indeed has astonishing defensive powers. Usually when Mu Hui pulled out the, even disaster realm warriors would avoid it. Not many would go into close combat with Mu Hui when he's holding the. From Mu Hui's perspective, even though the Shi family's martial spirit was extraordinary, it was still flesh and blood in nature, and shouldn't be able to withstand the energy of the dead spirits in the. However, one slash didn't sever Shi Yang's arm and only left a mere bloody gash. He was even more surprised than Shi Yang was. Backing away quickly, Shi Yang took in a deep breath and secretly released 3 and tried to incite the at the same time. This was the first time he had used the in combat. The 6 yin pearls combined their forces, releasing a surge of yin power that followed along Shi Yang's arm and rushed straight towards the palm of his right hand. A head-sized green light ball quickly formed in his palm. Electric snakes intertwined inside the green light ball, and wisps of chilling evil powers flowed out from inside the ball. It was filled with a dark, cold ambience. Yin power continued to vigorously flow into the light ball. The green light ball became bigger and bigger. In a few seconds, the light ball was already the size of a basin, shooting out green light like a green sun. Mu Hui's expression shook for the first time. "Friend, stop struggling," Mu Hui said. The soul martial spirit was like a shockwave, and it struck at Shi Yang's soul again. Blast! Before the soul martial spirit could unleash its effect, Shi Yang suddenly roared. The green light ball in his hand abruptly flew out, and smashed at Mu Hui like lightning. Boom! All of a sudden, the green light ball burst out and wisps of pure yin power, along with traces of Shi Yang's will, fell towards Mu Hui like raindrops. At the sound of the explosion, Shi Yang's restricted soul was finally pulled out from the dark abyss by the negative energies. Clarity returned to his eyes. On the other side, Mu Hui was doused by the rain-like shower of yin power. His body suddenly became stiff, and the circulation speed of his profound qi slowed down. The shining clenched in his hand was also flickering. It was also affected by the yin power formed after the explosion of the green light ball. Move! The 3 suddenly drifted away from Shi Yang's side, and silently moved towards Mu Hui. Before Mu Hui could react, Shi Yang flew out like a missile. His thin body swiftly fell into one of the, and stormed at Mu Hui with his fist. "You're dead meat." A bloody cold glare flickered across Mu Hui's eyes. Mu Hui raised his left hand, and the veins in his hand popped up. His left hand instantly became twice as big and turned a frightening dark green color. An ambience of dead souls came from his hand. Mu Hui raised his hand to strike, and as if it could block the space, smashing towards Shi Yang's iron fist head-on. Boom! In the thundering rumble, Shi Yang's body was as solid as stone and balanced on the ground. But Mu Hui was completely in shock, his body was forcibly thrown back. The earth-shaking terrifying power that projected from Shi Yang's fist exploded onto Mu Hui's and forcefully knocked Mu Hui away. Shi Yang, who was at the first sky of the human realm, with his one punch, managed to make Mu Hui, who was at the third sky of the human realm, to lose ground. Under the effect of this punch, which was accompanied by the different negative energies, skyrocketed in power. It was definitely not something that a warrior of the same realm could handle. This was just the beginning of Mu Hui's suffering. Just when he finally managed to steady himself, he suddenly felt like he had sunk into a swamp, and his body rotated uncontrollably. He was directly sucked into a setup by Shi Yang. Mu Hui's face suddenly changed. Hee. Shi Yang grinned, but his eyes were as cold as ice. He fiercely flew out. Crush! Mu Hui roared inside and an enormous flow of spiritual energy suddenly poured into Shi Yang's mind. Shi Yang's flying body stopped midway and fell to the ground. Mu Hui's expression was grim, in his hand drew a strange arc and wisps of dark, cold energy flowed from and churned inside the gravitational field. The soul martial spirit was triggered again. Mu Hui kept secretly reminding himself to be calm. He put in all his concentration to feel the power change in the field, trying to figure out a way to escape from it. But there was a spirit-level martial skill after all. Plus it was also formed with both the negative energies and profound qi. Despite having the soul martial spirit, Mu Hui still couldn't figure out any pattern in a short period of time. The high-speed whirling of the not only slowed down the flow of his profound qi, It seemed to also weaken the sensitivity of his soul martial spirit. There were already traces of sweat on Mu Hui's forehead, his body kept rotating, but he couldn't figure out the pattern of the. On the other hand, Shi Yang only lay on the ground for a moment before the outburst of negative energies dragged him out of the dark abyss again. Shi Yang's eyes suddenly became clear again and he sneered. He stared coldly at the whirling Mu Hui in the. With just a change of his thoughts, he stirred up the yin power in his body, and poured it into the once again. With more power added, the gravitational force became stronger. Just by circulating the negative energies and profound qi, that could already forcibly stop a warrior of the same realm. Now that he added yin power to the field, the power of the surged once again. A flow of chaotic power suddenly burst from the. The circulation speed of the field doubled. Pu. Mu Hui spurted out a mouthful of blood and he felt as if his soul martial spirit was in a meat grinder. A stabbing pain was assaulting his head and all the profound qi in his body was ground into a mess. His defense became significantly lower too. Shi Yang held in his breath to concentrate and his expression was cold and stern. He used all his will to manipulate the. The chaos of the was full-blown. The frantic grinding power violently tore Mu Hui's body. In the field, Mu Hui's whole body was splattered with blood, his flesh torn and exposed. The seductive light in his eyes also slowly dimmed. Chapter 98, Fattened Up. Chapter 98, Fattened Up. Mu Hui was shivering, and the flesh on his body was slowly falling off. At this point, his soul martial spirit was completely useless, he couldn't even let out a roar anymore. And at this moment, Shi Yang entered into the. His fingers were like a spear, stabbing straight towards Mu Hui's neck. Poochie. Blood sprayed out of Mu Hui's neck like a fountain. His spine broke and he died tragically in the field. All the profound qi in Mu Hui's body flowed into the 720 meridians in Shi Yang's body. Mu Hui was at the third sky of the human realm, but his profound qi was much richer than other warriors of the same realm. The time it took Shi Yang to absorb all the power in his body was also a few dozen seconds more than with other people. Soon, Mu Hui turned into a dry corpse and fell to the ground lifelessly. Shi Yang's expression was calm, he closed his eyes to feel the profound qi that came from Mu Hui's body. Feeling the changes in his meridians, he slowly sat down on the ground. There was a swelling pain coming from his meridians. The continuous intake of profound qi from many warriors made his meridians sting slightly. The different negative energies kept pounding in his body, agitating his soul. However, this time the backlash in his body was not that fierce and crazy and he didn't know why. As he calmed down and removed himself from the effects of, Shi Yang realized his whole body was sore. But the overflowing negative energies did not overpower his mentality, nor made him fall into a state of slaughter and chaos. Closing his eyes and calming himself down, he felt the purification of negative energies in his meridians. Shi Yang quietly tried to find the source. A change in his soul. After quite a while, Shi Yang's mind flickered and there was an answer in his mind. During the fight with Mu Hui, his soul martial spirit occasionally unleashed strange effects and repeatedly tried to pull Shi Yang's soul into an abyss of darkness, to become a captive under the power of his mind. Whenever that happened, the negative energies in Shi Yang's body would suddenly burst out. Those negative energies rushed to the depth of his soul like lightning and forcibly dragged his consciousness out of the dark abyss, letting him escape the shackles of Mu Hui's soul martial spirit instantly. Because of Mu Hui's soul martial spirit, the negative energies broke out again and again, using the dark, evil, negative powers to attack Mu Hui's soul martial spirit. During the clash, the negative energies that should have crumbled Shi Yang's soul were mostly used up fighting against Mu Hui's soul attacks. The violent negative energies should have caused Shi Yang to fall into a state beyond redemption. Yet because of the existence of Mu Hui's soul martial spirit, those negative energies became an aid to defeat Mu Hui's soul attacks. That means, the soul martial spirit used by Mu Hui counteracted the negative energies that could have destroyed Shi Yang's mind and helped him recover himself. These string of thoughts rapidly flashed through Shi Yang's mind, and he was correctly able to determine that the reason he didn't face the tremendous backlash from the negative energies was due to it acting as a constraint against Mu Hui's attacks from his soul martial spirit. Deep in his heart, There were hints of violent and murderous thoughts growing, but these thoughts were no longer that intense. Using his strong will, Shi Yang didn't fall into a state of frantic killing. Thinking through these things, he relaxedly sat on the ground and silently started to circulate his profound qi. After some time, the stinging in the meridians of his body suddenly started becoming intense. Under the tearing pain, wisps of pure strange power slowly flowed out of his meridians, forming streams of warm currents in his body. After transforming the profound qi of the many human realm warriors, the extraordinary power that resulted was quite impressive. Most of the power spread throughout Shi Yang's whole body and disappeared into his flesh, bones, meridians, and organs. Only a minority of the extraordinary power gathered in the profound qi in his dantian, making his profound qi much stronger and purer. Shi Yang's heart was calm. He didn't first go and explore the change in his profound qi, but instead he sank his mind into the flesh, bones, and meridians of his body. He could clearly feel that the wisps of mysterious power formed into what was like a magical nutrient. And in a way he couldn't understand, it was slowly nourishing his whole body. During this process, Shi Yang felt like he was bathing in a hot spring. Every pore on his body relaxed and were all taking in that miraculous nutrient. His body was slowly silently changing. Those mysterious powers moved around in his meridians, disappearing into his flesh and bones, taking root in his organs, and resting in his skull. He digested the information deeply. It was not the petrification martial spirit. Shi Yang's mind was crystal clear. He immediately realized the mysterious power that was nourishing his body was definitely not the petrification martial spirit. It was the immortal martial spirit. A realization popped into his mind and Shi Yang suddenly opened his eyes. He quickly looked at his right arm. The right arm that was slashed by had a deep wound. But now, the flesh in the wound was slowly wiggling and healing at a visible speed. The flesh and the meridians seemed as if they had a life of their own. Under the watchful eyes of Shi Yang, the wound that was 2 centimeters deep gradually healed bit by bit, the flesh wreathed together and the cells reformed. The wound slowly closed up, forming into a scar, then finally disappeared altogether. 10 minutes. In a mere 10 minutes, the 2 centimeter deep wound had been completely healed and not even a single trace was left. The place at which his right arm was harmed was now as smooth as glass. There was not even a single line, nor a trace of blood. It was as if he was never hurt. Shi Yang moved his arm and realized there wasn't even a single bit of pain. His right arm had no abnormalities whatsoever and felt same as the left arm. Shi Yang's eyes were bright, his face was irrepressibly ecstatic. In a span of 10 minutes, such a deep wound was healed to its original state. There was no pain and no discomfort. When did his immortal martial spirit become so impressive? Shi Yang clearly remembered that his recovery speed back then was definitely not this fast. Back then, even if his wound had been healed, he would still feel some discomfort and some pain. He would need more than half a day for a wound that size to be completely healed. This time, it was only 10 minutes. The immortal martial spirit has reached a new stage. After a short while, Shi Yang quickly and keenly grasped the key point. The magical upgrade of the petrification martial spirit reminded him, and made him realize that after consuming so much profound qi, those extraordinary powers activated the immortal martial spirit just like how it did with the petrification martial spirit. And now the immortal martial spirit had entered a new stage. No wonder all those extraordinary powers mostly flowed into his flesh, meridians, bones and organs. Turns out this time it was the nourishing his immortal martial spirit. Now everything was clear. Shi Yang's expression was full of joy. He seriously felt the changes in his body, then after a while he finally calmed down, and continued to sit there and circulate his profound qi. The profound qi in his dantian had also absorbed a part of that extraordinary power. Now, under the shifting of his thoughts, the purer profound qi slowly flowed along all the meridians in his body. Every time after completing a full cycle, the cluster of the most pristine profound qi in his dantian became more refined. Slowly, the refined body of profound qi turned into what was like a bright light ball. With every circulation cycle, the size of the light ball became smaller, but the power it contained grew even more. Shi Yang was delighted again. The change in the profound chi light ball was exactly a special sign of the breakthrough from the first sky of the human realm to the second or third sky. Starting from the first sky of the human realm, every time you reached a new sky, the size of the profound chi light ball in the dantian would become smaller. But the profound chi within would grow stronger in power. This was the process of refinement. Only when you refined over and over again, would the impurities in the profound chi light ball be completely cleared. And only then would the profound chi become more and more pure, followed by the strengthening of the power it contains. Realizing that this was the golden opportunity to break from the first sky to the second sky of the human realm, Shi Yang didn't dare to hesitate. He concentrated with all of his will to circulate his profound chi. He repeatedly circulated and refined his profound chi. The impurities in the profound chi lessened, making the profound chi become more and more pure. In that strange space, there was no concept of time. After who knows how long, the profound chi light ball shrunk from the size of a fist to the size of a walnut. However, the concentration of the profound chi was 30% stronger than before. Not only that, the purer profound chi was circulating in his body at a speed twice as fast as before. Under his will, a wisp of profound chi flowed out of his fingertip. It was shining in dazzling white light, and there was a faint glistening tint in it, like some mysterious crystal. Shi Yang had a joyous look on his face. He looked at the wisp of glistening profound chi, and the smile on his lips slowly widened. Human realm, second sky. This time the warriors from the dark world really fattened him up. Not only did his immortal martial spirit enter into a new stage, he also reached a step further in his martial art realm, and straight up entered the second sky of the human realm. Lub-dub. Lub-dub, lub-dub. The yin pearls from the 3 meridians of Shen-Q, Tian-Q, and Yin-Du suddenly started pulsing violently. The pulse rate of the yin pearls this time was much faster than usual. The summoning power from the heart of the stone statue also grew stronger. Shi Yang's mind flicked, he couldn't help but gaze towards the place where the starlight gathered. He suddenly realized that the light from the starry sky seemed to become disordered. They wandered at that one area like fireflies, but didn't flow into the mysterious place anymore. There was a change. Shi Yang's brows furrowed. From the strange movements of the yin pearls in his chest and the unusual phenomenon with the stars, he could sense something bad was happening. Lub-dub, 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 lub-dub. The pulsing of the yin pearls were becoming even more lively, as if they were urging him to quickly hurry to that area. There seemed to be something anxiously waiting for him. Boom, boom. A loud thundering sound, even when it was 1,000 li away, still reached here resiliently from that place. The 3 meridians of Shen-Q, Tian-Q, and Yin-Du suddenly stung in pain. He felt as if someone was attacking his meridians. His body was indescribably weird. Without hesitation, Shi Yang took in a deep breath, sprinted, and rushed to that place with his fastest speed. Chapter 99, But I want to kill you. Chapter 99, But I want to kill you. At the heart of the stone statue. In a huge deep hole, starlight was shining like fireworms. The deep hole was not made of stone, but it contained a red crystal with a black spot moving on its surface like a star. The heart-shaped red crystal was floating in the center of the hole, and light from the edges of the hole was shooting into the crystal. The red crystal was so clear and beautiful and had a mysterious power buried inside it. It was like staring at the starry sky when one looked at that crystal. The heart-shaped crystal was as large as a fist, as if it was a big light spot in the hole, although it was sending out dazzling lights and overwhelming energy. On the wall of the hole, dense bunches of dazzling lights flashed into the red crystal and covered the glittering crystal like a natural shield. Off to the side of the deep hole, Beiming Ce looked indifferent, and the 3 warriors were staring at the crystal in surprise. Up in the sky, the massive star river pattern projected its light onto the crystal and drifted by slowly. Every warrior could feel the mysterious energy from that crystal, as if it had the ability to concentrate all the power from the stars. It was attracting every warrior. No matter if it was Beiming Ce or the 3 Dark World warriors, they all stared at the crystal greedily. Why hasn't the young master arrived? This mysterious crystal will be taken by Beiming Ce. A Dark World warrior at the first sky of the disaster realm said coldly, His face looked weird in the light of the crystal. The other 2 warriors of the 3rd sky of the human realm were standing separately by his side, keeping watch for Mu Hui, who could show up any second. Beiming Ce stretched out his left hand again and blue flames flew out. The blue flames flew up into the sky and turned into a huge blue hand projecting onto the crystal. Boom! The light shield on the crystal produced a huge deafening sound and blocked Beiming Ce's huge hand made from his polar ice flame martial spirit. The huge blue hand shattered as soon as it touched the light shield. Bunches of blue flames turned into small flames and shot above the light shield. Gradually, it turned back into a huge blue hand again. Beiming Ce didn't give up, as he triggered his polar ice flame martial spirit again. Boom! The light shield defended again, shattering Beiming Ce's polar ice flame martial spirit and turning it back to blue flames. Under Beiming Ce's consistent attacks, the light shield was twisted and squeezed like a balloon, causing it to withdraw into the crystal a bit. Beiming Ce's polar ice flame martial spirit had an icy air which could freeze everything. Every time the huge hand touched the light shield, the icy air would permeate into it. After several times, the defensive power of the light shield became weaker. A secret delight flashed in Beiming Ce's eyes. Bang! 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 Under the 3 warriors' eyes, Beiming Ce operated his polar ice flame martial spirit again and again to seize that crystal, permeating the icy air into the light shield to decrease its defensive power. This is bad. The Disaster Realm warrior changed his expression, as he said in a low voice, Beiming Ce will get the crystal soon if he is not disturbed. Our young master will be too late. The Lord and Mistress of the Dark World would be angry if Beiming Ce got this crystal. What should we do now? Stop Beiming Ce. That guy ordered and operated his right away. Just as Beiming Ce's blue hand tried to catch the crystal, that showed up and was thrust into the blue hand. Chi chi chi. As soon as it touched the blue hand, the claw slowed down and sent out dim blue light. It was suppressed by the polar ice flame. Seeing the situation deteriorate, the other 2 warriors took action as well. Flew toward Beiming Ce. Beiming Ce's face turned icy as he said coldly, "You finally can't wait." Immediately, Beiming Ce vanished into the air. The next moment, Beiming Ce appeared right beside them, and the polar ice flame turned into small bunches of flames and tried to wrap up the 3 warriors. The 3 were terrified and soon worked together to fight against Beiming Ce. Beiming Ce yelled and vanished again. Bang! A warrior of the 3rd sky of the human realm fell to the ground on his back. Then, Beiming Ce showed a cold smile. "You guys want to compete with me?" Bunches of blue flames crossed by the frozen man who died quickly. Beiming Ce yelled again and appeared behind another warrior and patted his head. "Pa!" That guy's head exploded and he died instantly. The last Disaster Realm warrior sat down in terror and tried to trigger more. Green needle-like thorns came out from his body and shot in all directions. "You are a Disaster Realm warrior, but you are not favored by God, for you don't have a martial spirit." Beiming Ce smirked. An ice wall coagulated from polar ice flames appeared in front of him and the thorns were blocked. The Disaster Realm warrior shifted his face. Without hesitation, he continued to trigger his thorns, which shot in all directions. He knew that Beiming Ce has the teleport martial spirit, so he couldn't shoot his thorns in only one direction, although it consumed much of his profound chi. He wanted to buy more time for Mu Hui to arrive. Unfortunately, he didn't know that Mu Hui had already been killed by Shi Yang. Standing behind the ice wall, Beiming Ce was not in a hurry. He watched that warrior like a cat watching a mouse. "I would like to see how long you can last." He couldn't endure for long. 3 minutes later, his thorns became less and less. To trigger the cost a lot of profound chi. Although the thorns were powerful, it consumed much profound chi. Therefore, he realized that his profound chi was about to run out. Why hadn't the young master arrived? That man looked around quickly and became more and more panicked. "You won't meet him." Knowing he was waiting for Mu Hui, Beiming Ce said indifferently, "Because you are going to die." Then Beiming Ce teleported again. This time, his body turned into hard ice and approached the warrior through the thorns. Under that guy's horrified eyes, the ice surrounding Beiming Si's body expanded and he was covered by the polar ice flame. Cack cack. His body froze quickly and became an ice corpse. His terrified expression was also frozen on his face. Beiming Si raised his leg and kicked the man with a disappointed face. Pa. The frozen warrior was smashed into several pieces blocks of ice. His body was shattered. Beiming Si walked at a leisure pace towards the deep hole, and frowned as he looked at the floating crystal. It's finally quiet. Ta-ta. Just then, light steps came from afar. Beiming Si frowned with an annoyed face. Too annoying. These people from the dark world. It's like they won't even disappear. Turning his head back, Beiming Si looked to the direction where the footsteps came from. Beiming Si wondered, and a smirk climbed up his mouth. Well, how surprising that this boy is still alive. The Dark World warriors are all crap. Shi Yang stopped his steps and stared at Beiming Si, who looked gloomy. Shi Yang, it's really lucky for you to live till now. Beiming Si beamed. We are both from the Merchant Union, the 5 big families, so we could be friends in the future. Therefore, I don't want to kill you. Leave now, and I can pretend that I've never seen you here. You don't want to kill me? Shi Yang beamed. No. Leave. Before I change my mind. Beiming Si nodded. But, I want to kill you. With a smile in his corner of his mouth, Shi Yang's eyes still showed coldness as he replied, I have waited for too long. Beiming was surprised at first. Then he pulled himself together and said, so audacious. Never mind, it won't take much time to kill you. And the Shi family will lose hope if I kill you. My grandpa will like it. As he was talking, Beiming walked slowly toward him without using his teleport. Tatter. Tatter. Just then, steps came from afar again. Before long, Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan ran in this direction in worry. As they arrived, they didn't even look at Shi Yang, instead focusing on Beiming Si. Mu Yu Dai asked happily, Young Master Beiming, you've arrived. Beiming Si bowed a little and nodded to them with a smile. Yeah, I've been here for quite a while. Also I have cleaned some trash from the dark world to avoid troubles later. Well, you haven't cleaned up this trouble. Shi Yang stated indifferently, appearing somewhat bored. You. Hehe, you are far from able to cause me trouble. Beiming Si scorned, it's no harder to kill you than it is to kill an ant. I'm waiting. Chapter 100 Endure. Chapter 100 Endure. The big chapter 100. And as a big thank you to our readers, look out for 5 bonus chapters coming soon. After Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan arrived, they said hello to Beiming Si first and then were attracted by the floating crystal in the deep hole. They looked excited at the sight of the shining crystal and could clearly sense the mysterious energy from it. Every warrior was able to tell that this crystal was extraordinary. Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan had suffered a lot to get here. They fought against the Dark World warriors, Flaming Stone Men, Yin Sho and Mud Dragons for the big chance here. As for Shi Yang, they just glanced at him once and turned away. In arrogance, Beiming Si walked over to Shi Yang step by step without using his teleport martial spirit. Shi Yang stood still, seemingly waiting for Beiming Si to take action. He secretly activated his petrification martial spirit and his body turned dark brown. Silently, Shi Yang blended his yin power and profound qi, producing 3. Controlled by his will, the 3 fields gradually separated. He had seen Beiming Si's teleport martial spirit and he knew it was a fierce martial spirit through Hanzhong. The 3 were prepared as a counter for the teleport martial spirit. Don't blame me since you seek your death yourself. Beiming Si raised his left hand as he got within 10 meters of Shi Yang. Blue polar ice flame appeared in his palm. As he threw out his arm, the blue flame became an ice bird which flew in the sky and left a graceful blue trail. That ice bird was so vivid that even the feathers on its head could be clearly seen. It was breathing blue flames from its mouth on its ice-cold face. Beiming Si looked on coldly with contempt in his eyes. For him, it wasn't too much effort to kill Shi Yang. Just as the ice bird flew near him, a cold light flashed across Shi Yang's eyes. A huge green light ball filled with dense yin qi suddenly shot out from his chest, and it was intertwined with electricity and yin power. Boom! The green light ball struck the ice bird and gave off thunder. Dazzling blue and green light exploded like fireworks while the green light ball and the ice bird cracked at the same time, turning into blue and green light spots. Beiming Ce frowned in surprise and nodded slowly while gazing at Shi Yang. Good. You really are something to kill Mo Zhon. After saying that, Beiming Ce's face turned rigid. More and more polar ice flame was produced by him. He looked like a bunch of ice flames, with blue flames gushing out of his body towards Shi Yang from all directions. A biting cold came from those ice thorns as they approached. Standing there, Shi Yang felt as if the space surrounding him was frozen solid. In the cold air, his profound qi circulated slower. When the cold air came into contact with his skin, his bones and veins were nearly frozen. At that moment, a warm stream suddenly flew out from his blood and bones. His body was defending against the cold automatically. The immortal martial spirit. Shi Yang's eyes lit up as he was secretly delighted. The warm stream went through his whole body like lightning. The next moment, he had gotten rid of the coldness. That happened in just a minute, and the thousands of ice thorns were merely an inch away from him. Yin Wall. A green shield appeared beside him which was made of yin power, dazzling and horrifying. The yin wall was like a huge upside-down bowl which protected him. The yin wall was so thin and transparent that Shi Yang could see things 10 meters away clearly. Although there was a mere mortal-level martial skill, it could absorb yin qi and turn it into yin swirls and yin pearls. There was a martial skill which utilized yin qi. With the help of the yin swirls and yin pearls, Shi Yang could make yin qi into all sorts of defensive weapons. Once the yin pearls were alive, he would have endless yin qi. The yin wall was refined from yin qi. Just as triggering once getting hang of Shi Yang found it could produce all sorts of defensive methods. This seemed to bring him endless surprises. Boo! Boo! The thorns thrust towards him and landed on the dazzling green yin wall, and their power was absorbed in an instant. Beiming Ce's polar ice flame martial spirit couldn't freeze the yin wall, let alone damage Shi Yang who was under it. Shi Yang hadn't even triggered his negative energy. The yin wall triggered by yin pearls seemed to control the polar ice flame martial spirit. Nonetheless, he still felt that the yin qi light spots were decreasing quickly. The power of the could only be strengthened by yin qi. The yin power used for his yin wall could be consumed and not produced. Without yin qi, the yin power from the yin pearls wouldn't increase. But this time, Shi Yang had absorbed all the yin qi in the yin field and formed 6 yin pearls inside himself, which would let him play with Beiming Ce for a long time. Icy thorns thrust on the green wall and the cold air permeated into it, but this was soon digested by the yin power within. Thus their battle was a deadlock from the very beginning. Beiming Ce couldn't believe that Shi Yang's green wall could bear the coldness from his polar ice flame. To him, Shi Yang could only endure for a few seconds. He didn't know that Shi Yang had advanced to the second sky of the human realm. Thus, he kept producing more polar ice, forming ice thorns and shooting them towards Shi Yang's green shield. Shi Yang had absorbed so much yin qi which had formed 6 powerful yin pearls. He was not afraid of Beiming Ce at all, even though he was at the disaster realm. Furthermore, Shi Yang hadn't used his negative energy yet. Therefore, he was very willing to continue the battle with Beiming Ce. Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan watched the two curiously. The two girls knew how capable Beiming Ce was. Disaster realm. Twin martial spirit. Training in the most precious martial skill of the Beiming family, Beiming Ce was at the top of the world. Though at the first sky of the disaster realm, Beiming Ce could even win against someone of the second sky. He would even have a shot against a third sky warrior. However, while battling with this boy from the Shi family, Beiming Ce's polar ice flame martial spirit couldn't even break his barrier. That confused Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan. Though Shi Yang had made great impression on the two girls in the martial competition in the God Stone Square, he was merely a warrior at the third sky of the nascent realm. It had only been 2 months after the martial competition. Shi Yang could reach the first sky of the human realm if he was talented. How could a human realm, first sky warrior survive against Beiming Ce? Seeing Shi Yang unmoved under Beiming Si's attacks, the two girls were quite surprised and looked at Shi Yang with confusion in their eyes. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Half an hour. After half an hour, the yin wall which encircled Shi Yang still could not be broken. Shi Yang looked indifferent but patient, happy to continue the fight. Beiming Ce couldn't stand it anymore. After pondering for a while, Beiming Ce withdrew his polar ice flame and stopped his attack. He said coldly, "I can't be bothered wasting any more time with you." A strange, red and blue sword was slowly taken out by Beiming Ce. Sky-cracking sword. Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan took a deep breath at the same time and looked at Shi Yang in pity, assuming that Shi Yang was about to die for sure. The sky-cracking sword was a spirit-level weapon which previously belonged to Beiming Shong. Beiming Shong entered the Earth's core where there were thousands of fire hills and refined it with earth fire and polar ice for 3 years. The sky-cracking sword had 2 colors on it. One half was red and the other half blue. With the help of the sky-cracking sword, Beiming Ce made his name in Tianyun City and never had an adversary. The sky-cracking sword was sharp, unbreakable and had the power of earth fire and polar ice. Warriors who were touched by the sky-cracking sword would first freeze then burn. Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan knew how vicious this sky-cracking sword was. Therefore, once the sky-cracking sword was taken out, the two girls assumed Shi Yang was going to die for sure. Beiming Ce yelled and appeared in front of Shi Yang with the sky-cracking sword. He thrust it in the air and it gave out red and blue light. Chi. The yin wall was cut into 2 pieces by the sky-cracking sword. Shi Yang was shocked. He immediately triggered his power and shuttled behind the. Meanwhile, the other 2 flew over suddenly, combining with the first one. The space Shi Yang around was twisted a little, seeming to be squeezed and about to collapse. Standing in the invisible house-like, Shi Yang calmed down, though his eyes grew more vicious while staring at Beiming Ce. Shi Yang was waiting for Beiming Ce to trigger his teleport martial spirit again, for him to enter the. Beiming Ce turned out to not disappoint him, as he triggered his teleport martial spirit another time. Chapter 101 Identity Exposed. Chapter 101 Identity Exposed. Beiming Ce rushed into the field created by yin power and profound qi span naturally, and it could influence a warrior's body functions. As soon as Beiming Ce broke into the field, he felt it and his expression changed. Inside the field, Beiming Ce floated in the air and couldn't help but spin endlessly. The first few seconds his head was down, but the next moment his body curled into a ball. He couldn't even balance himself. As the creator, Shi Yang was not influenced by the. He first observed Beiming Ce indifferently and then began to take action at once. Boom, boom, bang, bang. Shi Yang dashed toward Beiming Ce like a dragon. Spreading his arms, he caught Beiming Ce's waist and kicked him with his knees. Activating the, Shi Yang shoved his fingers at Beiming Ce's waist. Ding, ding. Crisp cracking sounds came from Beiming Ce's waist. Under his gown, Beiming Ce wore an armor covered with scales which looked like crystal and sent out cold air. They couldn't break the crystal armor, it only left several holes on Beiming Ce's gown. As Beiming Ce span in the field, he was so astonished that he operated his polar ice flame martial spirit again. Suddenly, the crystal armor extended and covered his entire body. In an instant, Beiming Ce's cheeks were covered with that scaled crystal armor. This armor was a secret defensive weapon and matched Beiming Ce's polar ice flame martial spirit. Under the effects polar ice flame martial spirit, a massive amount cold air went into the armor and activated it, for there was an icy air pouring out from it. Shi Yang's could not break Beiming Ce's armor, but they were permeated by his cold air and became more and more stiff. Stuck in the, Beiming Ce was still spinning swiftly. He couldn't stay still, and was attacked by Shi Yang. However, under the protection of that crystal armor, Beiming Ce had no worries at all. He was waiting for a chance to fight back. No. Cold light sparkled in Shi Yang's eyes, as he took a deep breath and finally operated the negative energy to trigger. A brutal bloodthirsty emotion broke out in his body. Looking rigid, Shi Yang was now surrounded by white smoke. Di Yalan's body quivered a little, as she looked at Shi Yang in surprise and screamed, "Ding Yang!" Mu Yu Dai's face shifted a little. As she cast her eyes on Shi Yang, her facial expression became complicated. Once Shi Yang activated, his negative energy spewed out and turned into a dense smoke, covering him with a bloodthirsty, brutal, and crazy air. After a glance at this vicious scene, Di Yalan and Mu Yu Dai realized that this boy from the Shi family was exactly Ding Yang. How can it be? Mu Yu Dai shook her head heavily with a complicated face and mumbled, "That's impossible. It must be wrong. They look different, and that Ding Yang was a mere unknown warrior. How could he be the young master of the Shi family? It's impossible." Mu Yu Dai couldn't believe it, nor did she want to believe it. Shi Yang is Ding Yang. Di Yalan and Shi Yang were intimate before, so she intimately knew about Shi Yang's. No matter how Shi Yang's face changed, he was definitely the same person when he operated. Standing there dumbstruck, Mu Yu Dai gazed at Shi Yang and mixed feelings came to her mind. Di Yalan's eyes sparkled and her breasts were floating with her short breaths. Looking at Shi Yang, she suddenly began to worry about him, as she said to Mu Yu Dai, "Xiao Dai, Beiming Ce is fighting with Ding Yang. How can it be like this? I don't want either of them to be hurt." Mu Yu Dai took a deep breath, calmed down, and shook her head. "Do you think you can stop them?" Di Yalan was surprised, but she still said, "We need to try." "You don't know Beiming Ce." Mu Yu Dai sighed. He would get anything he wants at any expense. And Ding Yang talked wildly, "Beiming Ce won't spare him." Even if Ding Yang is the young master of the Shi family, he can't compete with Beiming Ce. The Beiming family is more powerful than the Shi family. "No. I'm going to stop them." Di Yalan looked determined, and screamed, "Ding Yang, stop it. Young Master Beiming. Stop." Shi Yang could hear Di Yalan's scream clearly, though he didn't make a response. Wisps of negative energy were generated in his meridians and Shi Yang's power surged. He suddenly triggered and 7 marks appeared and struck Beiming Ce. Bang, 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 bang. Beiming Ce was struck 7 times in succession and was knocked out of the by Shi Yang and flew 50 meters away. Pew! Beiming Ce spewed out a mouthful of blood and the bones in his chest were broken. That crystal armor dimmed and couldn't defend against Shi Yang's. After falling to the ground, Beiming Ce stood up quickly with a pale face and blood on the corner of his mouth. "Ding Yang!" Di Yalan suddenly screamed, "Stop it. You too, stop it." Beiming Ce stood up with a hideous face, and carried his sky-cracking sword. After wiping the blood on his face, he viciously stared at Shi Yang. "Shi Yang, I will kill you and smash your Shi family." "You!" Shi Yang scorned in a rage, and licked his lips. "Who do you think you are? Ding Yang." Di Yalan screamed again. Mu Yu Dai began to worry, as she remarked, "Ding Yang, you know the Beiming family's strength. There's no point making an enemy of Beiming Ce." Shi Yang took a breath and turned to glance at the 2 girls indifferently. "I don't know you." Then, he walked to Beiming Ce step by step. Every step he made, the space around him twisted. As he was moving, there was radiating out a suppressing power. As long as he was within Shi Yang didn't need to worry about Beiming Ce's teleport martial spirit and he was confident that he could torture Beiming Ce slowly in the field. Beiming Ce finally learnt something. Seeing Shi Yang coming near, Beiming Ce's face turned cold. Instead of using his teleport martial spirit, he sat down where he stood. The sky-cracking sword rushed out. In the dazzling red and blue light, the sky-cracking sword fell right upon Shi Yang's head. Boom! The sword fell into the field and there came a strange sound. The red and blue sword shot out bluntly. Inside the field, the sword thorns were flying everywhere with its sharp murderous power. Z. Sword wounds appeared on Shi Yang's body. The sword thorns from the sky-cracking sword were extremely sharp and like Mu Hui's, they broke through Shi Yang's petrification martial spirit. Spirit-level weapon. Extraordinary. Shi Yang was shocked, then moved out from the field while covered in blood, feeling hot pain on his body. Dozens of sword wounds were left on Shi Yang by Beiming Ce's sky-cracking sword, every one of which was an inch deep. Teleport. Beiming Ce suddenly appeared beside Shi Yang as he injected his polar ice flame martial spirit into his fist and punched Shi Yang in the back. Boom! Shi Yang dashed forward about 10 meters and spewed out a mouthful blood. Before he managed to stabilize himself, Shi Yang operated his yin power and swiftly created a new yin wall. As soon as the yin wall was formed, Shi Yang found that Beiming Ce was already in front of him and was staring at him with the polar ice flame in his hand. If it had not been for Shi Yang refining the yin wall at his fastest speed, Beiming Ce would have frozen him using his polar ice flame and blasted him into pieces. Back! Beiming Ce yelled, stretched out his hand, and watched as the sky-cracking sword flew back into his hand like lightning. Carrying the sky-cracking sword, Beiming Ce smirked cunningly, "Let me see how you will fight back." Shi Yang looked gloomy, realizing that there was only effective on living things, but not on the sky-cracking sword. If he stayed in the, Beiming Ce could control the sky-cracking sword and attack him. If he got out of the field, Beiming Ce could approach and attack him using his teleport martial spirit. Troublesome. Beiming Ce possessed twin martial spirits, and many secret weapons. He had the sword to attack and the armor to defend. "Master Ce, don't kill him, he is my friend," Di Yalan suddenly cried, as she realized Shi Yang was in a bad situation. "Young master, could you spare him for my sake?" Mu Yu Dai hesitated, and also tried to persuade him. Beiming Ce was not moved by that, as he shook his head and said calmly, "I would usually say yes to everything you ask for. And if Shi Yang hadn't showed his horrifying ability today, I would spare him. But now, it's impossible. He is a human realm warrior, yet has so many secret martial skills, which threatens my life. And with him, the Shi family will have the chance to surpass my family. So he has to die." After the speech, Beiming Ce didn't hesitate anymore, and projected his sword toward Shi Yang's head directly. The sky-cracking sword flew like a shooting star with 10-meter sword thorns trailing it. The thorns exploded and fell in all directions, blocking the space. "Ding Yang!" Di Yalan cried in a miserable voice. "Humph!" Mu Yu Dai shook her head softly and pain crossed her eyes. Shi Yang uttered the 6 words. Among the sword thorns, Shi Yang looked determined without fear in his eyes. Under Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan's eyes, Shi Yang's right hand kept expanding while his left hand became thinner and thinner. At the same time, 2 strings of different horrible energy exploded from both his arms. Chapter 102, Nothing to do with me. Chapter 102, Nothing to do with me. Life energy was circulating in his right arm and death energy was circulating in his left. The 2 utterly different powers of life and death projected out of his left and right arms. Facing the glaring sword light of the sky-cracking sword, Shi Yang, who was in the state, seemed to have incited all of the potential in his body. In the moment of life and death, his 5 senses became unprecedentedly sensitive. The circulation rate of the 2 powers in both his left and right arms was astonishingly high. The right arm swelled up and became twice as big as usual, while the left arm shriveled and shrunk twice as much as under mode. It was like a layer of skin wrapping around the bone, looking very eerie. The patterns on the 2 hands suddenly shot out bright beams of light. The 2 vast surging powers simultaneously shot out from his palms. The palms of his 2 hands separately formed 7 and 7. The and flew out at the same time. As soon as A and A were formed, they immediately merged into one. In a mere moment, the 7 and the 7 all merged together into each other. There was formed. Boom, 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 boom. The 7 suddenly expanded multiple times. Like 7 shining door panels, they fiercely flew at the oncoming sky-cracking sword. Frightening blasts suddenly exploded and the fiery red and icy blue luster on the sky-cracking sword abruptly dimmed. An unpredictable mysterious power suddenly rushed into the sky-cracking sword from the hum, 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 hum. The sky-cracking sword rang in the air and was blown away by the force and kept tumbling in the sky. All of its luster was lost. Beiming Ce, who was controlling the sky-cracking sword with his mind, suddenly became as pale as a sheet. Blood dripped out of his 7 apertures and he let out a shrill scream. The sky-cracking sword and his mind corresponded to each other. The heavy damage to the sky-cracking sword had an empathic effect on him, and together both he and the sky-cracking sword were badly injured. For those who control swords with their mind, once the sword itself gets damaged, the owner will also be heavily injured. Clink. After tumbling for a while, the sky-cracking sword finally fell to the ground 100 meters away. Its luster dimmed and it lost all its spirituality. Beiming Ce stopped screaming. He kept using his mind to try and summon the sky-cracking sword, but he realized that the sword could not respond. Beiming Ce was filled with horror, and for the first time, his expression showed a trace of fear. After blasting out the power in Shi Yang's body was depleted by a third, and he also felt quite weak. But, when he saw that the sky-cracking sword lose its luster after this one hit, he felt delighted inside and his spirits rose. And when he saw that Beiming Ce was bleeding out of his 7 apertures, he was even more thrilled. Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan both blankly stared at Shi Yang. They could not hide the surprise on their faces. Mu Yu Dai even opened her mouth wide, her little hand covering her mouth, and stopped herself from letting out a scream. Shi Yang, who was only in the human realm, fought head-on, and was able to blow away the spirit-level weapon, sky-cracking sword, from the disaster realm Beiming Ce. And he was even able to destroy the spiritual connection in the sky-cracking sword. What is this? Mu Yu Dai was appalled inside, she couldn't believe her eyes. Is this really the boy from the dark forest? Mu Yu Dai suddenly realized that she didn't know Shi Yang anymore. The currently arrogant Shi Yang became more and more unfamiliar in her eyes, such that she didn't even know how to handle her relationship with Shi Yang anymore. Ding Yang! Di Yalan exclaimed, she shouted, "What are you doing?" Mu Yu Dai jumped, and also said anxiously, "Ding Yang, don't act recklessly. Beiming Shong is here too. If you touch the son of the Beiming family, it won't be good for you, nor for the Shi family." Shi Yang's expression was cold, he didn't say a thing and chose to ignore these 2 women. He bound Beiming Ce using the Beiming Ce just sat there unmoving, as he couldn't sense the existence of the. In his moment of carelessness he was trapped and he couldn't escape the gravitational force of the field. This time, Shi Yang also added negative energy into the. Now the field now had 3 completely different forces, yin power, profound qi, and negative energy. The 3 forces mixed together, increasing the power of the field by more than double. In the new, Beiming Ce was in an extremely helpless state. The muscles on his face trembled, and within the insane whirling of the field, all the profound qi in his body was bound. Only the polar ice flame's martial spirit remained unaffected by the. It still persistently flowed into the crystal armor and firmly protected Beiming Ce's body. Shi Yang swiftly flew into the field. He swung up his left arm and the formed from negative energy suddenly shot out and flew towards Beiming Ce's head without hesitation. Crack crack. A crisp fracturing sound came from Beiming Ce's skull. The devastating deadly energy in the poured into his head and cut off his life force. Wisps of pure vital energy quickly flowed out of Beiming Ce's body. Soon, Beiming Ce was turned into a dried-up corpse and all of his profound qi was absorbed by Shi Yang. The field disappeared in a flash. Thump! Beiming Ce's corpse fell to the ground, his eyes still wide open, as if he had died with regrets. He didn't even have time to shout out threats. Once Beiming Ce died, his body shrank and the crystal armor on his body was obviously a whole lot looser. Shi Yang took in a deep breath and coldly stripped the crystal armor off of Beiming Ce's body, bluntly placing it in his backpack. Then he didn't even look at the dazed Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan and quickly left, also picking up the dimmed sky-cracking sword along the way. On Beiming Ce, these 2 things were the most powerful and left the most powerful impression in his mind. Whether it was the sky-cracking sword or the crystal armor, both were extraordinary treasures. Even if Shi Yang couldn't use them himself, he didn't want to let the 2 girls gain any advantages. Ding Yang, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy, Mu Yu Dai said in a traumatized daze. She murmured, Beiming Ce is like Beiming Shong's very own life. You killed Beiming Ce. That means Beiming Shong will not only deal with you, he's going to destroy the whole Shi family. Ding Yang, you made a mistake. You really made a mistake. You're digging your own grave. Bit. Shi Yang turned his head, he gave her a cold and stern glance, and said ruthlessly, "If you keep blabbing, I'll kill you too." What did you say?" Mu Yu Dai's expression was filled with disbelief. She raised her hand and pointed at Shi Yang and shrieked, "Ding Yang, I've saved your life. And this is how you treat me." Shi Yang's face was full of impatience, his eyes were cold, and he swiftly moved to Mu Yu Dai's side. Smack! Shi Yang's hand slapped across Mu Yu Dai's face and made her stumble back a few steps, leaving a bright red handprint on her face. "Bit! Listen up, I don't owe you anything. If you keep rattling in my ear, I will make you shut up once and for all." Shi Yang coldly gazed at Mu Yu Dai, whose demeanor was a little insane. He said with a murderous look, "You know how I am, I never give mercy when it comes to killing, and that includes women." "Ding Yang!" Di Yalan screamed, "How could you hit Xiao Dai? You shut up too." Shi Yang sneered and gazed at her with a cold look in his eyes. "When we parted our ways in the stone woods, we broke off all relations. You have no right to talk crap about me. Don't think for a moment that there's something between us just because I fucked you. You know exactly what you gained from me. I owe you nothing." Di Yalan's delicate body shook as she looked at the ruthless Shi Yang, and she could only feel as if she were in an ice cave. Both her heart and her body were frozen solid. Di Yalan tightly clenched her teeth and she tried hard not to let herself cry, but bright teardrops still appeared in the corner of her eyes. Her heart felt as if it was pierced by a sharp knife and the pain seeped into her heart. In this moment, Di Yalan finally realized how much she cared about this man. Looking at the cold expression on his face, Di Yalan finally knew what she had given up for the rest of her life. "Ding Yang, you will regret this. You will definitely regret this." Mu Yu Dai covered her face and screeched hysterically, "You will definitely regret this. You and the Shi family will all be destroyed by Beiming Shong." Smack! Shi Yang was just about to leave, but he turned around and gave another slap to Mu Yu Dai's face. His expression was dark and he said in scorn, "Bitch! You think that once you sought refuge in the Beiming family, Beiming Shong was going to take revenge for you? You're joking. Beiming Shong is a fierce and ambitious man. You think he was going to fight to the death with the Dark World for a woman? Do you know why the people of the Dark World are here? Do you know what fate you'll be facing once you walk out of here?" Mu Yu Dai's pretty face turned pale and her eyes were filled with desperation. Finally she made no more sound. She already guessed this possibility, but refused to admit it. Now that Shi Yang mercilessly said it out loud, Mu Yu Dai finally couldn't ignore her speculation anymore. She felt cold from head to toe, and felt as if all the hard work she put in was just an illusion. "From now on, you both have nothing to do with me." Shi Yang heartlessly glanced at the two girls for the last time, and turned around to walk towards the pit. He said coldly with his back facing the girls, "Don't get in my way, or else you'll share the same fate as Beiming Ce." Then, Shi Yang slowly walked towards the pit. Di Yalan's face was filled with tears and her limbs were frozen, as if the life force in her body was all taken out. Her heart felt as if it was ripped to pieces, the pain pierced through her heart. Mu Yu Dai's pretty face had a red handprint on it. Her face was full of desperation and it looked like her life force was also cut off. She stared aimlessly into the sky as if she didn't know where to go from here. She had lost her way. "Xiao Dai, we've really made a mistake." Di Yalan's voice choked as she covered her face and quietly sobbed. "Woo." Mu Yu Dai couldn't hold it in anymore. She finally covered her face and cried. She cried in the most heartbreaking of ways, as if she wanted to cry out all the sadness in her heart. Shi Yang stood at where the pit was, his expression cold, as if he didn't hear the weeping of the two girls at all. He only furrowed his brows and looked forward. Lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. The yin pearls in the Shen Q, Tian Q, and Yin Du meridians pulsed even more merrily. After coming here, the yin pearls had been extremely active. Looking at the floating, glistening crystal, Shi Yang realized this was what was summoning the yin pearls. The mysterious power coming out of the crystal must have been resonating with the yin pearls at a distance. The two sides seemed to have some sort of mysterious connection. However, standing outside the pit, Shi Yang didn't know where to start. He had no idea how to get his hands on the crystal. He pondered for a moment, then tried to stir the yin swirls, forming yin qi in his palm. The yin qi slowly gathered and flew out of Shi Yang's palm, forming into a giant hand made of dark green light which grabbed at that crystal from far away. Wisps of strange yin power were released from the 6 yin pearls. The yin power was like invisible strands of thread that seemed to also flow into the crystal. The dark glowing green hand slowly pressed down and steadily landed on the light shield of the crystal. Pop! Suddenly a slit cracked open in the light shield. The barrier that kept defying Beiming Sea's polar ice flames now softened down by itself and opened up wide for Shi Yang's dark glowing hand. The crystal suddenly gave off a beautiful dazzling light and slowly floated towards that big dark glowing hand. Chapter 103, The Space Collapses. Chapter 103, The Space Collapses. The starlight pervaded the sky and fell like raindrops, gathering on the shiny crystal at the heart of the stone statue. At that time, the starlight in the crystal was flowing in its pathway, shiny and captivating. The crystal floated up into the sky, slowly moving towards the huge black hand made of yin qi. Shi Yang was rather happy, and immediately began to control the crystal with his will, making it approach him. Dragged by the yin qi hand, the crystal finally flew out of the deep hole and flew over near Shi Yang. Bang, bang, bang. Great thunder came out from the deep hole. After the crystal left the hole, the crystal wall exploded and broke into pieces, giving off a dazzling light. The starlight in the sky dimmed at once in comparison. As the deep hole collapsed, the mysterious star river pattern in the sky started moving slowly as it turned vague, while the yin qi, poisonous gas and bunches of flame clouds began to diffuse. Looking down from the sky, one would find that the mountain-like stone statue had begun to crack and dissolve. At the same time, between the statue's heels, the group of Kai Xiao and Beiming Shong could clearly feel the abnormalities occurring within the space, and the power that was constraining them began to decrease. Their expressions changed and they immediately tried to operate their energy to free themselves from their constraints. They were trapped for a long time and had failed to escape after many ties, so they finally quietened down. But seeing that the space was going to collapse and the restrictive power was decreasing, they had to try one more time. The 2 legs of the statue were cracking while the suppressive power in the heels was weakening. As the pressure from the stone statue was getting weaker and weaker, Kai Xiao and Beiming Shong's struggle took effect as the stone on the heels began to crack. If it went on like this, they could get out from under the heels in a short time. At the heart of the stone statue, the deep hole collapsed and the crystal wall exploded, while the odd dazzling light from the crystal wall turned colorful and slowly disappeared. Both the crystal wall and the light existed to protect that crystal. So when the crystal flew out, their mission was complete. That huge black hand approached with the crystal and it glittered with a dazzling starry light above Shi Yang's head. That crystal was like the essence of shooting stars, containing mysterious powers from the stars. Looking up at the crystal, Shi Yang frowned and began to think. How to take that crystal? Frowning, Shi Yang thought for quite a while and guessed that the yin pearl had some connection with the crystal, so he would be able to touch the crystal. Shi Yang couldn't help but stretch out his hand to catch the crystal floating above his head. Boom! The crystal suddenly broke and gave off numerous lights which burrowed into Shi Yang's body. Wisps of cool starlight filled with mysterious star power went into Shi Yang's pores and concentrated themselves at his heart. Bang, 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 bang. Dull drum beats came from Shi Yang's heart. In the dazzling starlight, Shi Yang's heart strangely changed. The starlight rooted itself in Shi Yang's heart and became a part of it. In an instant, Shi Yang's heart changed as if it had turned into the crystal and began to sparkle. After a while, his heart went back to normal. The starlight integrated into Shi Yang's heart and gave off a cool air. Bang, bang, bang. Horrible blasts came from the heels. The group of Sky Realm warriors worked together and finally shattered the heels to escape. Those Sky Realm experts flew up into the sky one after another to see what was happening above. The odd space collapsed and the mysterious star river produced a light pillar. The light pillar fell from the sky and struck Shi Yang. Shi Yang, who was standing in the deep hole, disappeared at once. Bang, 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 bang. That odd space slowly cracked like a broken mirror. After the crystal left, that broad stone statue cracked, piece by piece, and turned into dust. Between the endless booms, the scenes shifted quickly. The group including Kai Xiao felt that they walked out from a broken mirror. From the cracks in the collapsed space they could see the Yin Valley. In the Yin Valley, one after another cracks appeared in the sky filled with colorful lightning. Some cracks looked like star rivers falling from the sky. Xia Xinyang looked indifferent, and mumbled, "It's been 7 days. We finally get there. Miss, do you think the original seal of the martial spirit was within? We will know when Shiyang comes out." Xia Xinyang looked indifferent as she said, "But, I don't think he will appear in the Yin Valley." "Why? That old guy planned everything. If that guy was still capable, maybe he could send him to the endless sea. However, looking at the collapsing space, that old guy must have used much of his energy creating all this. I guess he could only send Shiyang to somewhere far off in the dead swamp to make him comfortable for a short time. What should we do? Let's go. Leave the Yin Valley and head off into the dead swamp. Miss, do we need to kill him when we find him? Find him first." The three including Xia Xinyang had witnessed the changes in the Yin Valley and they had foreseen the result, so they left the Yin Valley quietly without informing Zhuo Shi. Half an hour later after Xia Xinyang had left, some human figures suddenly showed up from one of the cracks in the sky. Bang, bang, bang. Warriors below the sky realm all fell from the sky and their heads were spinning. People at the lower realms, like Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan, were bleeding heavily from their mouths and looked miserable. Looking bitter, Han Feng and Ku Long cried out immediately after they stood up, "Young Master! Young Master!" Bei Ming Shong, Kai Xiao, Jua Qi, and the Lord of the Dark World, who were at the sky realm, floated in the sky, and gradually landed while looking around in confusion. "See!" Bei Ming Shong roared and stared at Yin Kuei and Zhu Shan, "Where is my CE?" Yin Kuei and Zhu Shan had also been trapped under the statue's heel, but not with Bei Ming Shong, so Bei Ming Shong didn't see them in that odd space. Young Master entered too. "I don't know where he is now." Yin Kuei looked gloomy and anxious. "We were trapped by the stone statue as soon as we entered it and we found the chance to escape only when the odd space collapsed." See. Bei Ming Shong roared and asked in haste, "Where are you? Mu Hui?" The Lord of the Dark World's face changed as he couldn't find Mu Hui, and began to shout along with Bei Ming Shong. Since their bellows echoed through the Yin field, Bei Ming Shong and Mu Hui could hear them once they returned to the Yin field. However, they received no response. "CE is still inside." Bei Ming Shong turned pale and looked up into the sky, to find that the cracks had mysteriously closed somehow. The space had entirely collapsed. In a glance, Bei Ming Shong realized this cruel reality. His face looked horrifying like an irritated demon beast, while polar ice flame came out from his eyes. "Xiao Dai, where is CE?" With polar ice flame in his eyes, Bei Ming Shong looked to Mu Yu Dai in a rage. Mu Yu Dai looked dumb under Bei Ming Shong's terrifying eyes, unable to speak. Bei Ming Shong was impatient and his eyes glittered. He stretched out his hand to Mu Yu Dai and a bunch of blue light flew into Mu Yu Dai's body. "Where is CE?" Bei Ming Shong asked again. As soon as Mu Yu Dai was struck by Bei Ming Shong's blue light, her face turned dumb and she lost consciousness as she whispered, "He was killed by Shiyang." Di Yalan tried to scream, but as she saw Mu Yu Dai's abnormal look, she kept silent. "Shiyang." Bei Ming Shong howled with all his veins protruding. He treasured Bei Ming Ce, who had a twin martial spirit, as the heir of Bei Ming family and placed high hopes on him. Now that Bei Ming Ce had been killed, Bei Ming Shong was furious. Bunches of polar ice flames flew out like clouds and tried to cover Han Feng and Ku Long. Ku Long was close to Bei Ming Shong, so he was immediately wrapped by the polar ice flame and turned into an ice statue before exploding. Han Feng's face changed, and after a quiver, he disappeared. "I will shatter your Shi family." Bei Ming Shong bellowed like a beast and dashed toward Han Feng. "Teacher!" Zhuo Shi cried in fear. Kai Xiao frowned and sighed. He fought back unwillingly by refining bunches of dense fog which wrapped Bei Ming Shong's polar ice flame. Bei Ming Shong, live and let live. He knew it would be a long battle if he fought with Bei Ming Shong. After a little hesitation, he wrapped Bei Ming Shong's polar ice flame martial spirit, and yelled, Han Feng, let's go. Han Feng dashed toward the far shore of the yin field like a ghost without any hesitation. At that time, he knew Bei Ming Shong wouldn't stop, so he had to leave as quickly as possible. He had to return to the Shi family alive and send them a message to avoid a massacre. Kai Xiao, how dare you stop me? Bei Ming Shong hollowed as if going crazy. I'm gonna kill whoever tries to stop me today. Hey, that girl named Mu, have you seen my disciple Mu Hui? The Lord of the Dark World asked Mu Yu Dai in a weird voice. He was killed by Shi Yang too. All were killed. All. Mu Yu Dai was still unconscious, not knowing what she was talking about. Zhu Zi, his face turned pale, and with the 9 angry flame in his eyes, he flew up into the sky and dashed out of the dead swamp. A strong will was suddenly released from his body, which expanded in all directions. He had kind of figured out where Shi Yang was. Meanwhile, in a secluded area in the Yin Valley, a black shadow was leaving swiftly. Dash. Chapter 104, Great Disaster. Chapter 104, Great Disaster. Sponsored by E. Espinoza. Dash. In the Yin Valley. Zhu Zi, he flew into mid-air as he spread out his soul consciousness in all directions. He also slowly started moving away from the Yin Valley. Bei Ming Shong's expression was ferocious. He was just about to fight to the death with Kai Xiao, but suddenly realized that Zhu Zi he silently rose into the air. His mind clicked, as he suddenly remembered what he saw in that strange space, and he also realized that Shi Yang might be somewhere nearby. Kai Xiao, I will deal with you sooner or later. Bei Ming Shong clenched his teeth and his expression was grim, but he didn't attack again. He withdrew his polar ice flame martial spirit, and flew into the sky, spreading out his soul consciousness to search for traces of Shi Yang. Yin Kuei, Zhu Shan, you two spread out and search the outer perimeter of the dead swamp. Remember, if you see Shi Yang, don't kill him, I want him alive. Bei Ming Shong shouted with a bone-chilling voice while suspended in mid-air. Yin Kuei and Zhu Shan did not hesitate and immediately left the Yin Valley. Within a moment, only Kai Xiao, Zhua Qi, the people from the Zhuo family plus the absent-minded Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan remained in the giant Yin Valley. Master, Zhuo Shi glared at Kai Xiao. When we came, Grandpa Shi told you to take care of Shi Yang. You're not playing dumb now, are you? Kai Xiao's expression was full of frustration. He shook his head and sighed. I already tried to stop Bei Ming Shong, but now there are 2 Sky Realm Masters who want that boy dead. If I forcibly speak out, I will have to face 2 Sky Realm Masters. Especially when these 2 are in a very angry state. If I cut in now, I'm afraid that. Master, are you scared of them? Zhuo Shi raised her head and grunted. Xiaosha. Wu Yunlian suddenly spoke out, and she sighed. Mr. Kai Xiao is doing this out of frustration. With his capability, even against 2 Sky Realm warriors, he could easily walk away unharmed. But he's worried for us. Don't you understand? Zhuo Shi was dazed, then after quite a while, she finally murmured, but what about Shi Yang? If he died, Grandpa Shi would become miserable. There's nothing we can do about it, he can only hope for the best. Wu Yunlian's dark brows were deeply furrowed. She shook her head and said in confusion, how could it be? How could that brat Shi Yang possibly have killed Bei Ming Ce? Bei Ming Ce had twin martial spirits and was in the disaster realm. What exactly happened? Kai Xiao looked perplexed as well, but in his mind he secretly guessed that it was because of that strange space. While inside, he clearly saw that a beam of light poured into Shi Yang's body as he was exiting. That light beam caused Shi Yang's body to disappear into thin air, and he suspected that everything was related to that change in the strange space. Hey! Kai Xiao exclaimed, suddenly realizing something. He said in surprise, if there was some sort of treasure inside, then that boy definitely got it. Bei Ming Shong and that Sky Realm warrior are hastily trying to find Shi Yang. This must be one of the reasons why. Kai Xiao, I gotta go. From now on, you and I are even. At this moment, Zhua Qi suddenly said goodbye to Kai Xiao, and without saying anything else, he quickly sprinted out of the yin field. Zhua Qi! Kai Xiao yelled. What? Zhua Qi turned back, and said impatiently. I know what you're thinking. Kai Xiao frowned and said dismissively, If you really find Shi Yang, then it's fine if you get the thing. But I hope you would spare the boy, don't take his life. The outer perimeter of the dead swamp was filled by all different sorts of plants. The swamps and the poisonous fog were everywhere. Besides, there were many warriors who ventured into the swamp. Even if Bei Ming Shong and Zhu Zi he wanted to find Shi Yang, it would be no easy thing. But it's different for Jua Qi. He was the master of the outer perimeters of the dead swamp. He could casually come and go in the swamps, control the poisonous fog, and all the demon beasts in the outer perimeter listened to him. If there is anyone who was most likely to find Shi Yang, then it would be Jua Qi. If that boy does as he's told, then I won't make it hard on him. Jua Qi sneered, but if he stays ignorant, I will be merciless. Kai Xiao, this is none of your business now, you better not get involved. Hatred from two Sky Realm Masters is no joke. If you want your apprentice to live, then don't give a damn about that boy's life. Then, Jua Qi suddenly flew out and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Later that night, stars filled the night sky and the moon was bright and clear. East of the dead swamp, in the branches of a towering old tree, Shi Yang scowled. He blankly gazed at the starry sky, strange lights flickering in his eyes, mysterious and unpredictable. Inside the strange space, the starlight beam came down from the sky and landed on his body, directly sending him out of that marvelous space and to this place. Once he landed here, just by looking at the poisonous fog not too far away and the swamps that were everywhere, he immediately judged that this was the outer perimeter of the dead swamp. When he just got out, it was still daytime. Shi Yang repeatedly checked his chest, but realized that other than specks of starlight on his heart, there seemed to be nothing else unusual on his body. The only change he could feel was faint starlight drifting down from the sky and slowly gathering at his heart. That was only during the day. At night, when the stars all twinkled from the sky, Shi Yang's heart seemed to have 10 times his current vitality, but his pulse rate became slower instead. However, the power of the stars in the sparkling night sky flew down from the vast starry sky and secretly flowed into his body and into his head. The star power at night was much stronger than the morning. He could deeply feel it. He could very clearly feel that the stars in the sky let out bits of faint star power, but the star power couldn't be seen by the naked eye. The star power that did not form into starlight spots were 100 times weaker, so you couldn't see their light, but they truly did exist. He didn't need to do anything, not even focusing his mind. Whether it be day or night, his heart would endlessly absorb the star power without the need for him to focus on gathering it. So after being curious for a while, Shi Yang temporarily stopped paying attention to the change in his heart. The reason why he killed Bei Ming Ce was because there was only one crystal. Bei Ming Ce wanted it, and he wanted it too. So when he showed his true strength, only one was going to live between him and Bei Ming Ce. Shi Yang clearly understood that Bei Ming Ce was the future head of the Bei Ming family. He was ruthless and had a lot of foresight. Seeing that Shi Yang was only in the human realm but with such power, Bei Ming Ce wasn't going to let him live any longer. Even if he didn't make a move in the strange space, after they got out, Bei Ming Ce would use every method possible to try to kill him. Bei Ming Shong would have definitely done the same thing. They will be doing it for the future of the Bei Ming family in order to clear any future threat to the 100 years of supremacy of the Bei Ming family. Regardless if he killed Bei Ming Ce or not, Bei Ming Ce will never let him go. In that situation, what was there to consider? After killing Bei Ming Ce and absorbing all his negative energy into his meridians, deep down he could feel the bloodthirsty, violent thoughts. However, when the starlight beam shone onto him, all the negative emotions that sprouted in his heart were instantly washed away, and it eased his fear of losing control. After his meridians had purified all of the profound qi from Bei Ming Ce's body, in the afternoon of that day, some extraordinary powers flowed out. But those powers all flowed towards his heart and were deposited into the countless little starlight spots in his heart, making Shi Yang marvel in delight. Raising his head, he looked into the sky at the countless stars spread above. He could feel the faint star power flowing out from the stars. Shi Yang smiled wryly and shook his head. He closed his eyes to feel around. Realizing that no one else was around, He finally came down from the old tree and continued heading towards the east side of the dead swamp. The Merchant Union was at the south side of Tianyun City. If he wanted to go back to Tianyun City, he should have walked south, but now he was walking east. The east was the direction towards the endless sea. He never planned to return to the Merchant Union at all. Even if Beiming Ce and Mu Hui hadn't died, but because he obtained the crystal, the Sky Realm Masters in the Yin Valley would not let him go. Shi Yang knew this in his heart. Although the Shi family was one of the great 5 families in the Merchant Union, it had no Sky Realm Master, so it will be hard for them to shield him. If he returned to the Shi family, he would have brought a great disaster onto them. And because of him, the Shi family might be killed off entirely. He knew deep in his heart that he was their true target. From Xia Xinyang, he had heard about many of the mysteries in the Endless Sea, and he knew that the Endless Sea was the center in which many warriors gathered. It was many countless times bigger than the Merchant Union, the Fire Empire, and the God-blessed Empire. And within it there were countless strong figures. That was his true destination. While it was still dark out, he carefully released his soul consciousness and secretly scouted around. Determined, Shi Yang walked towards the east. Still nothing. South of the dead swamp, Beiming Shong's face was grim, and his expression was dark and scary. Not far away, the Lord of the Dark World, Zhu Zihe, was also murderous looking. These days, we've already searched everywhere in this area. Any active warriors or mercenaries in this area were all identified with our soul consciousness, but we found nothing. Could it be that the kid didn't return to Tianyun City? Didn't return to Tianyun City, Beiming Shong frowned, and said coldly, "It seems that we have to change directions. I'll go to the east, the rest is up to you." Then, Beiming Shong suddenly flew out and went towards the east of the dead swamp. "Miss, if that guy were in the dead swamp, shouldn't he be in the south? If he doesn't go back to Tianyun City, then he will never get any protection." On the east side of the dead swamp, beside a waterhole, a giant man next to Xia Xinyang said confusedly, "Go back to Tianyun City?" Xia Xinyang stretched the corners of her lips. What's the use of going back? The Shi family doesn't even have a Sky Realm Master. Not only would he not get any protection, he will bring disaster to the Shi family. If I were him, I would never return to the Shi family before reaching the Sky Realm. Instead, it would be better to go as far away from the Shi family as possible. While saying this, Xia Xinyang knelt down and washed her face next in a stream. Then she finally stood up and said, "Let's go to the east side." The east just happens to be the direction of the Endless Sea. If we really can't find him, then we can just directly return to the Endless Sea. Understood. The 2 giant men nodded together. Hum, hum, hum. At this moment, a strange humming sound came from Xia Xinyang's pocket. Her beautiful face changed slightly and she couldn't help but take out a wind chime from her pocket. She stared at the wind chime for a second, and then said in surprise, "The Shura King Xiao Han Yi will be here soon." Ah, why would the Shura King come to the dead swamp? Isn't he trying to find Yang Hai? I don't know either. Xia Xinyang shook her head and said casually, "But it's fine, Xiao Han Yi is at the second sky of the Sky Realm, and what is cultivating is the evil blood path of the 5 Shura paths. If he stirs the evil in his blood, then he would have the power of a 3rd Sky Realm warrior. These Sky Realm Masters in the dead swamp are all still at the 1st sky. Once Xiao Han Yi gets here, those people will probably calm down. Or else with the Shura King's temper, I'm afraid those people would be in the worst of luck. The 3 Shura Kings of the Yang family are all lunatics. Miss, you should be careful and make sure you don't cross his line." "I know what I'm doing." Chapter 105, The Star Martial Spirit. Chapter 105, The Star Martial Spirit. Sponsored by M. Jackson. Shi Yang kept moving east. The dead swamp was wreathed in poisonous gas and covered by swamps. To walk in this area, one must be cautious, or else he would sink into the mud or be attacked by demon beasts. It was quite secluded to the east of the dead swamp, so warriors barely showed up in this area. All along the way, Shi Yang met some mercenaries who were searching for demon beasts and special herbs. They were almost at nascent and human realm, rather low levels. Shi Yang wanted to leave the dead swamp quickly, so he didn't want any conflict with those mercenaries. He avoided meeting them so that they wouldn't remember his face and leak his trail to Beiming Shong. That night, after careful thought, Shi Yang took out Beiming Se's sky-cracking sword and ice armor from his bag. He threw them into the green swamp and watched them be devoured by the dirty water within. The sky-cracking sword and ice armor were both extraordinary weapons refined by Beiming Shong. The sky-cracking sword and ice armor contained Beiming Shong's perception, who may have sensed them within a certain distance. Although knowing that the sky-cracking sword and the ice armor were rather precious, Shi Yang still abandoned them to protect himself. The poisonous gas in the swamp was strongly corrosive, which Shi Yang had already tested, so he believed that Beiming Shong wouldn't be able to sense them once they were devoured by the poisonous gas. After that, Shi Yang continued to move eastward. At night, 3 days later, standing among the bushes, Shi Yang hid his scent and quietly gazed ahead of him. The sound of a brutal battle came from the wetland ahead, of which one side was much stronger than the other. Although Shi Yang was very curious, he didn't go and watch. He decided to go eastward when the battle had finished. A quarter of an hour later, the battle ahead quieted down. Shi Yang still didn't move. After half an hour, assuming that they might have left, he walked out of the bushes towards that wetland. Swamps surrounded the two sides of the wetland, but Shi Yang had to cross that wetland to go eastward. When he got there, Shi Yang found there were 7 or 8 corpses on the ground. Their profound qi had already evaporated into the air, so he didn't get anything. The corpses all belonged to the same mercenary union, as their armors looked similar. From the wounds on their dismembered bodies, they seemed to have been attacked by demon beasts, as they were torn apart. He stared at those corpses for a while, and found he couldn't get any benefit, so he sped up to leave without further exploration. Well, it turns out you did pick this way. At that time, Xia Xinyang's voice came from the bushes beside him. Just then, Xia Xinyang's beautiful figure, with her face behind the veil, walked out from behind the bushes. Behind her, the 2 huge towering men were wiping the blood off their hands with a grey rag. Your people killed them? Shi Yang asked her calmly. Yes. Xia Xinyang nodded without further explanation about why the mercenaries were killed. She looked at Shi Yang with her beautiful eyes, and said, You turned out to get the original seal of Ouyangji's star martial spirit. Ouyangji? Shi Yang's face changed. Who is he? He was the guy who created the fake gate of heaven and left the original seal of his martial spirit. Ouyangji was a legend from 1,000 years ago in the Endless Sea and was the star god of the 3 gods sect. He had reached the 3rd sky of the spirit realm, just a step from the true god realm. Xia Xinyang said slowly. The 3 gods sect. The star god. What on earth is that? Shi Yang cried in surprise. 1,000 years ago, the 3 gods of the 3 gods sect entered the 7th Dark World together and fought against Avi Dark King in the Dark Sea. However, they were entangled in the Avi Hell by 30 million soldiers, which resulted in the most brutal battle the 7th Dark World had seen in a millennium. The 3 gods sect lost a lot from that battle and many disciples died. After that battle, only the Sun God came back from the 7th Dark World while the other 2 gods disappeared. However, only 5 million of Avi Dark King's troops survived and Avi Dark King was badly hurt and has never appeared from the bottom of the Dark Sea for the past 1,000 years. The 3 gods of the sun, moon, and star? The 7th Dark World? The Avi Dark King? Shi Yang was so confused that he shook his head. You mean the gate of heaven was created by one of the 3 gods, the star god? Yes. Xia Xinyang nodded softly. After that battle, many people thought that the moon god and star god were dead, since they never showed up again in the Endless Sea. According to the fake gate of heaven and strange phenomenon in the Yin Valley, Ouyangji must have died of his injuries. However, no one knows how he reached here, killed the level 8 mud dragon, created this fake gate of heaven and god domain and left the original seal of his martial spirit. The original seal of his martial spirit. Shi Yang yelled, looked at his heart area, before a dazzling light crossed his face. The original seal of a martial spirit is an imprint of a martial spirit, so people can receive the martial spirit from inside an original seal. Those God Realm experts could turn their martial spirits into original seals so that someone would continue to carry his martial spirit. The star martial spirit's typical sign is that there were spots like stars in the heart area which formed a miniature star river. Xia Xinyang explained. This is a martial spirit. Shi Yang's eyes lit up as he looked at his heart area in surprise. It's not only a martial spirit, but a sacred level martial spirit. Xia Xinyang confirmed. A sacred level martial spirit? Shi Yang was dumbstruck. There are levels for martial spirits. Sure. According to its power and number of evolutions, martial spirits can be divided into mortal, profound, spirit, sacred and god levels. For example, the three martial spirits, the sun, moon and star, of the three gods sect are all sacred level martial spirits. The reincarnation martial spirit of my Xia family is also a sacred level martial spirit. There are too few martial spirits in your area, so they are not divided into different categories. In the Endless Sea, there are all sorts of martial spirits and each of them have special features and powers. If they were not sorted into different levels, who would know which martial spirit is more powerful or has more room for development? So what level is the petrification martial spirit from the Xia family? I'm not sure without any accurate test. But I think it is spirit level martial spirit at best. I've never heard of a sacred level martial spirit appearing in this area. Apart from its power, you will have to see how many times it can evolve and situation regarding its evolution. The details are complicated. In the Endless Sea there are martial spirit palaces to estimate the level of a martial spirit. Are sacred level martial spirits rare? Of course. Sacred level martial spirits are the highest martial spirits in the Endless Sea. The families who own sacred level martial spirits are all influential powers in the Endless Sea, so do you think sacred level martial spirits are rare? You mean, I got something awesome this time? What do you think? Miss Xia, thank you for telling me so much. I want to go to the Endless Sea. Are we traveling the same way? Xia Xinyang suddenly quieted down. There would be no conflict between Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang if he didn't go to the Endless Sea. However, once Shi Yang entered the Endless Sea and the message got out that he owned the star martial spirit, the three god sect would definitely find him at all costs. They would make him the god son of the sect and provided him with the best training resources. The three gods sect and Xia family have many disputes. Shi Yang's star martial spirit would make him an expert in the three gods sect. Once he went to the Endless Sea, the Xia family would have a formidable adversary. Miss. The two huge tower-like men reminded her in a soft voice. You really want to go to the Endless Sea? Xia Xinyang gazed at him with complicated look in her glittering eyes. Shi Yang was a little surprised, but couldn't figure out what was going on in Xia Xinyang's mind, so he thought for a while and smiled bitterly. Do you think I can still stay in Tianyun City instead of going to the Endless Sea? You know Beiming Shong's power in the Merchant Union. Not only myself, but my family would meet with disaster. I don't have any other choice. Well, to be honest, Xia Xinyang paused, and said, my Xia family and the three gods sect are adversaries. With your star martial spirit, you would become an important person in the three gods sect once you go to the Endless Sea. In the future, you will be my enemy, and formidable one at that. Shi Yang stiffened and took a few steps back to keep his distance from the three people in front of him. Smiling coldly, he asked, well, are you three waiting here for me to eradicate any future trouble? Miss Xia, I don't know why you are talking to me. You want me to be a ghost who knows everything? The two towering men walked out from behind Xia Xinyang and moved to both sides of Shi Yang with cold eyes. They were preparing to attack Shi Yang. Hold on. Xia Xinyang frowned and stopped the two towering men, then looked to Shi Yang. You can attach yourself to the Xia family first. I will plant some poison inside you and then send you to the three gods sect to learn their secret skills. Regardless of how high a position you have in the future within the three gods sect, you will always be a member of my Xia family, okay? Going to the three gods sect as a spy of the Xia family? Shi Yang smirked. Spy? This sounds good. Yeah, more or less. What do you think? Xia Xinyang focused her eyes on him. As long as you comply, I will help you. Learn secret skills in the Three Gods sect and not fight against my Shia family. I swear I won't hurt you. Okay, I'm in. Dash. Chapter 106, Godchild. Chapter 106, Godchild. Sponsored by M. Jackson. Dash. Shi Yang had to promise her. Xia Xinyang had made it clear that the Three Gods sect and the Xia family were adversaries. As she had waited in the Yin Valley after she knew that the fake gate of heaven was created by Ouyang, her purpose was obvious. After leaving the Yin Valley, Xia Xinyang assumed that Shi Yang would be here, so she waited for him. Or maybe she had come up with this idea when she was still in the Yin Valley. For Shi Yang, as long as he survived, he would have boundless opportunities. He didn't take the poison that Xia Xinyang had mentioned seriously, as he believed that his immortal martial spirit could easily defend against that toxin. Furthermore, since it was a long way to the Endless Sea, there was a chance that Beiming Shong would find him, so it was safer to travel with Xia Xinyang. He would put the past behind him for the moment. He would have the chance to fight back as long as he survived. Since Xia Xinyang explained her purpose, the two towering men then let Shi Yang go, admiring Xia Xinyang's ability to take advantage of the situation. Once Shi Yang was attached to the Xia family and then became a godchild of the Three Gods sect, they would know everything about the Three Gods sect. Even the two dumb huge men knew what it meant. Shi Yang would be more useful to the Xia family alive than dead. The next 2 days, Shi Yang smoothly traveled east with the three people. Having Shi Yang's promise, Xia Xinyang was delighted, and continued to explain to him about the Three Gods sect. The Three Gods sect was a huge power in the Endless Sea and had numerous disciples. The core disciples had the ability to absorb the energy from the sun, moon, and stars from their martial spirits. The Three Gods sect had 3 martial spirits: the sun martial spirit, the moon martial spirit, and the star martial spirit. The 3 martial spirits could absorb the light from the sun, moon, and stars. Warriors who possessed the star martial spirit were the rarest, thus the star martial spirit was considered to be the most powerful one among the 3. There was only 1 sun and 1 moon in the Grace mainland, while the stars were numerous. Their combined power was much stronger than the sun or the moon. The Three Gods sect was very mysterious, and their core disciples were not born with martial spirit, but obtained it after being submerged for 3 years in 3 separate ponds: the sun pond, the moon pond, and the star pond. The sun, moon, and star ponds were the most mysterious places in the Three Gods sect. No outsiders knew exactly where they were. Even many disciples of the Three Gods sect didn't know their exact position. The elders of the Three Gods sect would go to the islands in the Endless Sea every 10 years or so to collect talented infants and take them to the 3 mysterious ponds. The 3 ponds had a weird power, as many infants would soon die after being placed in them. Generally, less than 20 infants would survive out of 1,000 after 3 years in the ponds. Those who survived would inherit the power to absorb power from the sun, moon, or stars, and thus were authorized to be a core disciple of the Three Gods sect. They were then sent to the major islands and taught all sorts of martial skills by various teachers. Although those infants who survived the 3 ponds all had a martial spirit, their abilities were varied. As for the sun martial spirit, some infants could absorb 10 times the amount of power from the sun compared to others. These infants would develop their martial spirit several times, and they could absorb the sun's power much faster. Some could even produce sun fire from it. Some infants took too much time to absorb the power of sun, and their martial spirit wouldn't develop even if their realm were to advance. Although the sun, moon, and star martial spirits were all sacred-level martial spirits, they couldn't be completely mastered if they were not developed. Almost none of the infants from the 3 ponds could develop the 3 martial spirits to their highest potential. Even if their realm advanced, their martial spirits would stop improving over time. Only a few infants from the 3 ponds showed great talent each century. These infants were called a godchild. These godchildren were promising talents and were candidates to become the next the sun, moon, or star god. A godchild was so rare that they would be considered as the most precious treasure of the Three Gods sect, and the core sect elders would train them personally. Once they were chosen to take the mantle of one of the 3 gods, the rest would become core elders of the Three Gods sect, dealing with all sorts of matters. Most of the god-children came from the 3 ponds, while some of them were found in another way. Those who got an original seal of a martial spirit was also considered to be a god-child. This type of god-child were the most promising to become one of the 3 gods, since they got their martial spirit from one of the previous gods. Therefore, the god-children who inherited their martial spirit via an original seal were highly treasured. Shi Yang was a lucky dog. Since Xia Xinyang wanted to send Shi Yang to the 3 gods sect, she explained every detail carefully. She depicted the 3 gods sect as an evil religion with mysterious power, and told of many evil deeds performed by the 3 gods sect to provoke hatred in Shi Yang. Shi Yang knew Xia Xinyang's intentions, but he just kept silent. On that day, Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang came to the center of a swamp. They were standing on a dry land and looked for places to step on cautiously. All of a sudden, someone showed up from the swamp and laughed cunningly. "We meet again, Jua Qi." Xia Xinyang looked cold as she asked calmly, "Why are you here?" "I didn't come for you." Jua Qi smiled and then turned to Shi Yang. "Boy, give me that thing you got from the odd space. I promised Kai Xiao that once you give it to me, I will let you leave the dead swamp alive." "Jua Qi, you came for treasure?" Xia Xinyang took a breath and secretly made eye contact to the 2 huge men. "Don't play tricks." Jua Qi scorned, "I've been watching you for days. And you know my ability in the swamp. Do what I say if you don't want to sink. Or don't blame me for killing you." "Jua Qi, you can't hurt me," Xia Xinyang said calmly. "I know Miss Xia can reach the sky realm for a short moment, so what?" Jua Qi looked gloomy as he became impatient. "Once Miss Xia advances to sky realm, I will sink into the mud. And when you become weak, I would come out again. I know you can't reach the sky realm twice in a short time. Till then, I can do whatever I want." Xia Xinyang's eyes turned cold. "You cleaned up the 9-headed sky snake for me. I won't trouble you. Just leave the boy and disappear." Jua Qi looked at Xia Xinyang coldly and reached out his hand to Shi Yang. "Give me. And you can leave. Or don't blame me for what happens next." "Jua Qi, you are seeking death." Xia Xinyang grunted and said coldly, "This is your last chance to get back in the mud. Or, you will regret for it." "Regret? Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha." Jua Qi burst out into laughter. "Show me how you will make me regret." Greenish profound qi leaked out from Jua Qi's body to the center of the swamp. The mud in the swamp moved like waves. In an instant, 10 mud dragons flew out and jumped toward Xia Xinyang. Xia Xinyang had an indifferent expression in her eyes as she raised her arms. From the river of time, the power of reincarnation was injected into Xia Xinyang's palm. Xia Xinyang, who was at the disaster realm, suddenly rose up into the sky and stared at the mud dragons coldly, a lotus sign appearing between her hands. Countless blue lotuses flew out from her palm, filling the air with a refreshing scent and produced a dazzling light. Every lotus was as big as a wash basin. They surrounded Xia Xinyang. "Break!" Xia Xinyang pointed, and a lotus stuck to a mud dragon. With a huge thunderous roar, the power from Jua Qi on the mud dragon was shattered and it turned back into mud, falling into the swamp. "Break!" Xia Xinyang pointed again, while 10 lotuses struck toward Jua Qi. "Hee hee. You do this first. Let's see." Jua Qi withdrew his head and disappeared into the mud. "Return." Xia Xinyang seemed to know that she couldn't win against Jua Qi, as she stretched out her hand and withdrew all the lotuses to her palm. "Let's go." Xia Xinyang stretched out her hand and lifted Shi Yang, who was standing on the swamp, then dashed out of the swamp in an instant. The 2 huge men from the Xia family shouted and stamped, then dashed out like 2 bullets, before they landed behind Xia Xinyang. "Shi Yang! Shi Yang! Shi Yang!" At that moment, Bei Mingshong's howls came from afar, containing extreme hatred. The howls became louder and louder as Bei Mingshong approached. Xia Xinyang's expression shifted at once, as she realized the situation had turned bad. She grabbed Shi Yang and flew eastward as fast as she could while she still possessed Sky Realm energy. "You can't go anywhere." Bei Mingshong's soul consciousness overwhelmed the space with his crazy howls. Dash! Chapter 107, Strong Aid. Chapter 107, Strong Aid. Sponsored by M. Jackson. East of the dead swamp, a slim figure was flying in the sky whilst carrying a person. Under her, two towering giant men were also sprinting with high speed, as if they were angry black bears. Every time they hopped up, they were able to leap around a dozen meters through the air. In the surrounding swamps, a weird person covered in scales was half submerged in the mud. He moved through the swamp like a giant earthworm, his vicious eyes glinted with a chilling light. He kept watching the sky above the swamp, watching the flying slim figure in the air. Further away there were crazy roaring sounds. Someone was flustered and exasperated and kept clamoring along the way. His soul consciousness spread out and covered them from afar. The abnormal activity in the east of the dead swamp made many active warriors in this area frightened and baffled. The warriors who were hunting demon beasts all stopped, watching the sky with surprise on their faces. No one knew what exactly was happening. As if they heard their master's summons, many demon beasts in the swamps all jumped out one after another and stormed towards the east. In a moment, the eastern area of the dead swamp was a mess. Everyone was looking out for themselves. At the same time, Kai Xiao, Zhuo and Wu Yunlian had already left the Yin Valley and were walking towards the Yin field under the full exposure of the sun. The Yin field had been cleared of its natural Yin qi that covered it all year round. Under the blazing sun, all the plants that grew on the Yin field withered and died. There was also nothing left of the demon beasts that were previously active in the Yin field. They either died or ran away. The enormous Yin field now looked like a dead zone, without a single trace or life. Not even the sight of a single leaf from a plant. "Master, will Shiyang be okay?" Zhuo worriedly asked. "I don't know." Kai Xiao shook his head. He faintly sighed in his mind, feeling a little guilty. He knew that the odds were against Shiyang this time. Although the dead swamp was big, people such as Beiming Shong and Jua Qi all had sky realm capabilities. Not only could they fly in the air, they also had an omnipresent soul consciousness that could spread over a large area. Unless it was a master of the same level, it would be very hard to escape their hunt. At the Shi family, Kai Xiao once promised Shi Jian that he would do his best to protect Shiyang. However, now that Shiyang had encountered great danger, he could only stand by and watch. This made Kai Xiao feel a little guilty in his heart. Whenever Zhuo asked whether Shiyang would be okay, Kai Xiao would shamefully blush a bit, but there was nothing he could do. "Those two women, why are they following us?" Wu Yunlian furrowed her brows. She quietly glanced back, and said confusedly, "I think they came with the Beiming family. No need to care about them." Kai Xiao glanced behind him and said indifferently. Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan both looked desolate. There was an undissolvable dark haze on their faces as they slowly paced behind Kai Xiao and the group. Even though Zhu Zi he didn't clearly state his identity, the two girls had already guessed that he was the Lord of the Dark World. Although he was not here now, once he properly dealt with Shiyang, he will definitely come and take away Mu Yu Dai. The reason why he didn't take care of Mu Yu Dai now was because he knew she definitely wouldn't be able to escape. Both Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan knew this deep in their hearts. In that strange space, Shiyang already made a hard blow to their minds. Now thinking that more miserable fates would follow in the future, the two girls felt fretful, not knowing where to go. "Xiao Dai, will Ding Yang be okay?" Di Yalan lowered her head and faintly sighed. Mu Yu Dai's pretty face became cold and she sneered, "He's dead for sure. Beiming Shong is getting involved personally, and unless he could fly, he'll never escape his hands. Not only will he die, the Shi family will be doomed along with him. Beiming Shong is pissed, he will never let this go. I don't know why, but I feel like he's going to be okay. He always shows us a surprise." Di Yalan murmured under her breath, and lightly shook her head. "Surprise?" Mu Yu Dai's expression was cold. "There will be no surprise this time." "Hey!" At this moment, Kai Xiao suddenly raised his head and looked into the sky. Suddenly, his face changed and he exclaimed loudly, "Cyan bloodbat! Cyan bloodbat!" Zhuo dazed for a second and also looked up into the sky. "Hey, that is a really big bat. Master, what is it?" Is there something scary about that cyan bloodbat? The cyan bloodbat is a demon beast that can evolve continuously. Its body is solid as iron, it's very strong, and it especially likes to eat the flesh of warriors, so this is a very brutal demon beast. A level 3 cyan bloodbat is already very strong. The cyan bloodbats in the sky now are all at least level 3. And now there's 50 of them at once. This is not right. Wu Yunlian looked up at the sky and murmured. There are people riding the cyan bloodbats and they are strong. The weakest being in the disaster realm. Most of them are in the earth or nirvana realms. Kai Xiao took a deep breath. His expression was more serious than ever. The leader's capability is unfathomable. Even I cannot be able to sense his true capability. In our area, I don't think there is any force that can suddenly dispatch this many masters. Even the royals of the Fire Empire or the God-blessed Empire can't send out this many masters at once. After hearing that, Wu Yunlian's expression suddenly changed. No, they're coming down. Kai Xiao's heart sank, and he said hurriedly, Xiao Shi, stand next to me and don't move. Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan also noticed the abnormal situation in the sky. The girls both looked up at the 7 to 8 meter long bodies of the cyan bloodbats, their eyes glinting with a cruel violent light as they slowly descended. The two girls were frightened, not knowing what was going on. On the leading cyan bloodbat, the Shura King Xiao Hanyi boldly sat there and condescendingly looked at the people below. His husky voice said, "Which of you knows Shi Yang?" Shi Yang, Shi Yang, Shi Yang. Kai Xiao, Zhu Shi, and Mu Yu Dai exclaimed at the same time. Everyone's faces were full of awe, not knowing why these people would want to find Shi Yang. Shi Yang sure has offended a lot of people. Mu Yu Dai snorted. She righteously assumed that Xiao Hanyi and his group were strong enemies that Shi Yang provoked. Kai Xiao's face slightly changed. He didn't immediately answer. Instead, he first put his fists together and said, "May I ask what you are finding Shi Yang for, senior?" Kai Xiao saw that Xiao Hanyi's capability was unfathomable. He also saw that the Yang family's Shura blood guards who sat on the cyan bloodbats were mostly in the earth and nirvana realms. He was extremely stunned, so he didn't dare to overlook this matter. He kept his tone as one of utmost respect. Senior. Zhu Shi, Wu Yunlian, Di Yalan, and Mu Yu Dai were all dumbfounded. They became a little absent-minded. Kai Xiao was the Sky Realm Master of Cloud Mountain. He was one of the handful of strong figures in the God-blessed Empire, the Fire Empire, and the Merchant Union. It was said that he was more than 100 years old and was a well-known master and senior in all of the 3 countries. But today here he was referring to someone else as senior. Everyone was speechless. Shi Yang is the great-grandson of Yang Qing Di, the head of our Yang family in the Endless Sea. The reason we came this time is to bring him back to the Endless Sea. Do you know where he is? Xiao Hanyi saw that Kai Xiao's attitude was not bad, so he slowly loosened his expression and did not expose his irritable, crazy side. The Endless Sea? The Yang family? Great-grandson of the head of the family? Xiao Hanyi's words made everyone petrified. Especially Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan. The expression on their faces was weirder than ever. They would never have thought that Shi Yang had another identity. So you are the masters from the Endless Sea. Kai Xiao nodded. He raised his head and stared at Xiao Hanyi for a moment. Seeing that he was becoming impatient, Kai Xiao finally said, Shi Yang has obtained the treasure from the gate of heaven and suddenly disappeared from inside the gate. Now he should be somewhere in the outer perimeter of the dead swamp. Currently several Sky Realm Masters are searching for him in the outer perimeters of the dead swamp. If you want to find him, then do so quickly. If you're too late, then he will have met with a grim fate. Grim fate. All of a sudden, an extremely strong bloody smell came from Xiao Hanyi's body. This bloody smell covered the distance, like a canopy covering them from the sky, making everyone dizzy and hard to breathe from the strong odor. If anything happens to Shi Yang, then all the nations of those involved will be buried with him. Xiao Hanyi left these few words, and then slapped the cyan bloodbat and said, "Spread out and search the whole dead swamp. If anyone finds him, send the message immediately." The group of Shura blood guards from the Yang family rode on the cyan bloodbats, and in a moment they were all gone. "Master, Is this guy strong? Zhuosha said curiously. I'm afraid 3 Beiming Shongs together wouldn't be able to fight him. Kai Xiao's expression was grim. He meaningfully glanced at Mu Yu Dai and Di Yalan. His voice steadily said, the Beiming family is dead for sure. The people on the Cyan bloodbats are enough to sweep away all the 5 families of the Merchant Union. Beiming Shong is doomed this time. Mu Yu Dai's face turned pale, her body collapsed and she fell on her ass. Xiao Dai. Di Yalan exclaimed, what happened to you? Mu Yu Dai's expression shifted unpredictably and complex emotions flickered across her eyes. She looked like she was laughing and crying at the same time, as if she had gone mad. After a very long while, Mu Yu Dai's expression slowly became determined. She suddenly stood up. Come on, let's go find Shi Yang. Why would we want to find him? I will try everything to become his woman. No matter what he wants me to do, I'll do it for him. Ah! Di Yalan exclaimed, her hand covered her mouth, with a face full of disbelief. Xia Xinyang clenched onto Shi Yang and they were still flying through the air, galloping crazily towards the east of the dead swamp. Suddenly, an untraceable darkness started to slowly form under the clouds ahead. A mass of endless dark power suddenly rippled from the darkness. It wrapped Xia Xinyang's body, suddenly putting a pause to her speedy flight. Stop! In the pure darkness, there came a cold voice. I am the Lord of the Dark World. I don't want to make enemies with you people from the Endless Sea. If you drop that kid, then you can go now. Xia Xinyang floated in mid-air, her expression slightly cold. She said indifferently, I suggest you to mind your own business. My people will arrive very soon. I know you have the capability of a Sky Realm First Sky Warrior, but you're far too weak if you want to go against us. In the Endless Sea, people like you can only be a dedicated warrior, and not even one of the core warriors. If you want to keep your prestige in this place, then mind your own business. Not only was Xia Xinyang not scared, she even gave out threats. I wanted to get rid of exactly this fate, that's why I want what that kid has. In the pitch-black darkness, the voice continued, don't force me. In order to get that thing, I can give up the dark world. As long as I can step into the God realm in the future, I can rebuild the dark world anywhere, even in the Endless Sea. Xia Xinyang's face changed. She suddenly realized she probably won't be able to convince the opponent with words. Chapter 108, Waiting for an Opportunity. Chapter 108, Waiting for an Opportunity. Shi Yang felt humiliated. He was being carried by Xia Xinyang and flying in the wind. The sharp winds blew on his face and he felt a stinging sensation like blades stabbing into his skin. Wisps of fragrance from Xia Xinyang flew into his nose along with the wind. The fragrant breeze should have been a wonderful thing, but his position was seriously awkward and his mood just couldn't lighten at all. He was grabbed by the collar of his clothes and lifted into the air. Shi Yang felt more like Xia Xinyang was carrying him like a package rather than a living person. Although he knew that Xia Xinyang had no choice and had to take him to escape quickly, Shi Yang still felt humiliated. There was never another moment like this where he held such a desire for power. He desired stronger power. He desired power that could get rid of everything. Carried in Xia Xinyang's hands, he secretly made up his mind. If he was lucky enough to survive this, he would never let any other person carry him like this. He would use all his strength to find higher ground and he would override everyone else. Shi Yang clearly heard the conversation between Xia Xinyang and the woman's voice in the dark. After knowing that it was the mistress of the dark world, Shi Yang's expression became grim, but there was nothing he could do. Although he had many wondrous encounters and obtained 4 different martial spirits in his body, he was still only in the human realm. There was an insurmountable gap between him and Sky Realm Masters. This wasn't just some minor difference and couldn't just be offset by his mysterious martial skills. He clearly knew his own capabilities and he knew that against a master like this his chances of escaping would be minimal. So he didn't bother to speak. He only gathered his concentration and tried to find an escape opportunity. Do you really want to become enemies with the Endless Sea? Xia Xinyang took a deep breath, her beautiful figure slowly descending. Shi Yang's heart shook as he could clearly sense that the reincarnation power in Xia Xinyang was slowly disappearing. Once Xia Xinyang used her reincarnation martial spirit, The power of reincarnation would slowly disappear as it did not belong to her. When all of her reincarnation power is used up, Xia Xinyang would revert back to her original realm of a disaster realm, Third Sky Warrior. Just standing in mid-air used a lot of reincarnation power. When she realized that the mistress of the dark world completely blocked the path ahead, she knew that it would be impossible to keep roaming the sky freely while carrying Shiyang. They landed. Xia Xinyang dropped Shiyang and she coldly looked at the dark cloud that was slowly descending from the sky, and said dismissively, "In the false gate, there's only the original seal of a martial spirit. Once the seal has been obtained, it can no longer be used again." Pausing for a second, Xia Xinyang then said, "Which means, even if you kill him, you'll get nothing out from him." While saying this, Xia Xinyang's eyes swept to afar and she looked towards the swamp next to her. From the swamp came the sound of squelching mud. Jua Qi's body slowly surfaced from the swamp. Standing in the middle of the swamp, Jua Qi maliciously looked towards this area. "I don't believe you. There must be something else on this kid. Miss Xia, you just have to give him to me. If I really can't find anything on him, then that would have nothing to do with you." "Shiyang, Shiyang." Beiming Shong's roars came from far away, coming closer and closer. "Miss Xia." Jua Qi screamed again, "Give that kid to me, and when he drops into the swamp I will drag him underground. Or else, Beiming Shong won't leave him alone. I promise you, if there really is nothing on the kid, I will leave him alive." "All right." Xia Xinyang did not mince his words as she seemed to know that Beiming Shong was almost here. And with the situation with the mistress of the dark world forcing her hand, Xia Xinyang couldn't just directly take Shiyang away. After her response, Xia Xinyang did not hesitate. She moved and grabbed Shiyang and threw him into the distance. At the same time, she opened her mouth and a glistening dagger flew out from under her tongue. The dagger was covered in mysterious runes. The runes were only the size of tadpoles, but they slowly shifted on the dagger, as if they had a life of their own. Once the dagger came out, waves of mysterious power came from the runes. That power was able to cut off someone's soul consciousness. Xia Xinyang swung the dagger and casually slashed down. Suddenly, layers of ripples appeared in the void, glinting with light. The layers of ripples were slashed by Xia Xinyang's dagger, and in the ripples, Beiming Shong's furious face was faintly displayed. "Xia Xinyang, how dare you cut off my soul consciousness? I will kill you." In the distance, Beiming Shong roared in madness. His voice was filled with an earth-shaking wrath. Xia Xinyang remained unmoved. She held the dagger in her hand and her body swiftly danced. The dagger drew beams of light, making layers of soul consciousness waves in the plain void and shattering that soul consciousness bit by bit. The mistress of the dark world, who was hiding in the pitch-black darkness, saw that Xia Xinyang could cut off the soul consciousness of Sky Realm masters. Realizing that Xia Xinyang was not easily trifled with, the mistress did not venture out when she saw that Beiming Shong was about to arrive. Instead, that cluster of darkness slowly floated up the sky again and stopped inside a dark cloud. Thump! Shiyang's body suddenly dropped into the swamp. Jua Qi's face was filled with joy and he immediately stirred his martial spirit, wrapping Shiyang in layers of mud. He then dragged Shiyang with him and sank into the swamp. Shiyang instantly felt that it was hard to breathe. He hastily gathered his concentration and held in his breath. He secretly circulated the power in his body to prepare for any upcoming situations. In the cluster of mud, Shiyang felt like he was sinking God knows how many meters into the depths of the swamp. Suddenly, the mud cluster wrapping around his body abruptly dissipated. This was a tightly sealed, 5-square-meter cavity in the mud. There was mud all around and only a small amount of air, with no exit. In the mud cavity, there was only the excited-looking Jua Qi by his side. Jua Qi rubbed his hands together, looking very excited. He laughed sneakily and said, "We are 100 meters under the swamp. This cavity is created by my martial spirit. It can guarantee that you won't suffocate to death. Okay, now we can talk about what happened in that strange space. If you hand me everything, I can promise that I won't kill you and I will even escort you out of the dead swamp. You can figure it out yourself." Shiyang spread out his hands and stood still in his spot. "Whatever you can find on me you can take." I only want what you got from the strange space. Juachi dazed, and then said ruthlessly, I have no interest in anything else. I didn't get anything. Shi Yang shook his head, and said calmly, only bits of starlight entered my body and now it has merged with my blood and bones. Maybe if you eat my flesh, you can still get some power from the starlight. Kid, you really think I wouldn't dare to eat you? Juachi licked his lips, and said cruelly, if I can get power from eating you, then I wouldn't mind eating you whole. Shi Yang's expression remained calm, he simply sat down, and said, it's up to you. The thing is in my body anyway and I can't take it out, so do what you want. Kid, you would rather die than give it away? Juachi's expression was ferocious. He pondered and then suddenly said, did you know that I have many ways to make you wish you were dead? Shi Yang was silent and he didn't say a thing. The profound qi, negative energies, and yin qi all quietly came out of his body and started to slowly spread around the entire cavity. The three different powers spread out, but didn't immediately form into. Shi Yang was focused as he secretly took precautions. If Juachi made a move next, he would create the without hesitation. He knew that the definitely won't be able to go against the Sky Realm Juachi, but he only wanted to use it to restrain Juachi for a bit. As long as the could trap Juachi for a moment, even if it was only a few minutes, he grabbed the opportunity to flee to the surface of the swamp and maybe even find a chance to escape. Boom, 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 boom. Earth-shaking sounds came from above the swamp. The violent power fell into the swamp and even Shi Yang, who was 100 meters deep in the swamp, could still sense the commotion from above. Kid, don't expect that woman to save you. Now that Beiming Shong is here, she won't even be able to help herself. Juachi took a deep breath in and clenched his teeth. Don't force me to take extreme measures, just give me the thing now. I will promise you that if you're obedient, I will escort you out of the dead swamp. You know my power in the dead swamp. As long as I'm willing, even if that woman can't protect you, I can. How's this? I only got the sky full of starlight from the space and now all that starlight is in my body. The starlight can let me absorb power from the stars. It is a martial spirit. If you know how to transfer martial spirits, I wouldn't mind giving it to you. Other than that, I have nothing else to say. Shi Yang said casually. A martial spirit. One that can absorb power from the stars. Juachi's face was full of joy. He was so excited that his body was shaking and he laughed loudly. It certainly is a treasure. Kid, give it to me now. Quickly, give it to me. Didn't you hear me? Shi Yang frowned. That martial spirit is in me. I don't even know how to use it. How am I supposed to give it to you? Surely there's a way. There must be a way. Juachi was extremely excited and he shouted in the cavity, if you can obtain that martial spirit, then you can definitely give it up too. Hurry and think, you can definitely find a way. Shi Yang, I'll give you 3 days. After 3 days, if you give the martial spirit to me, I will promise to escort you out. 3 days. Shi Yang furrowed his brows and said dismissively, okay, I'll think about it carefully. Yes, you have to think about it carefully. After 3 days, if you still can't do it, hey, then don't blame me for being unkind. Juachi grinned. On that day, deafening blows kept coming from outside the swamp, indicating that Xia Xinyang and Beiming Shong were still battling. When the night fell, the fighting outside finally ceased. Shi Yang didn't know what was happening outside. His heart sank deeper and he kept thinking about how to escape from Juachi's hands. Boom, boom. Late at night, waves of a most destructive power suddenly covered the swamp. Those waves of power had such a frightening penetrative force that it pierced 100 meters deep into the swamp. It had an indomitable life force. It kept trying to find traces of warriors in the swamp and came straight at Juachi. What the hell? Who is this powerful? Juachi's face suddenly changed, his expression aghast. He saw that the waves of power came at him like flying dragons. He didn't bother about Shi Yang anymore. Shrieking, he rushed out of the mud cavity and clashed with the frightening power that carried the scent of blood. Shi Yang's eyes brightened. He sucked in a big breath and hurriedly he rushed out of the cavity, floating up towards the surface without regard for anything else. Dash! Chapter 109, The Shura King. Chapter 109, The Shura King. 100 meters deep in the swamp. The muddy and murky water mixed together, and since there was more mud than water in the swamp, it was very tough to escape. Once a man or a beast falls into the swamp, they will slowly sink in, and ultimately be engulfed by the swamp, becoming a corpse at the bottom of the swamp, which will eventually rot and never be seen again. The most frightening part of the dead swamp was the sheer size of it. There were hundreds of thousands of swamps, which had swallowed countless warriors and demon beasts, making all of them die within the swamp. Jua Chi was the only exception. As a hybrid between a mud dragon and a human, he could naturally move under the swamps, and use the mud in the swamps. In the dead swamp, even if he met a warrior of higher strength, Jua Chi could still easily dive into the depths of the swamps, and avoid disaster. All along, Jua Chi fit to the dead swamp like a duck to water, and never paid any regard to other people. But this time, deep below the swamp, Jua Chi had a terrified expression, and it seemed like he was terrified. The harsh, pungent odor of blood penetrated through the hundreds of meters of swamp, like the blood of dragons. This spirit of blood had a strong penetrating power, and a shockingly frightening strength. If it was targeting him, even hundreds of meters under the surface, it could still force him into an awkward position. Having lived in the dead swamp for so many years, Jua Chi was well aware that the deeper you traveled into the swamp, the more corpse chi you would find. The dead swamp had existed for tens of thousands of years, and countless dead souls were buried under these swamps. Those that died in the swamps couldn't gain redemption, and they always lingered at the bottom of the muddy waters. Because of that, there were always strong corpse chi lingering in the deepest depths of the swamp. The deeper you went, the stronger the corpse chi was. The power of this corpse chi could block the scoping powers of someone's soul consciousness, and it could disrupt all sorts of invading powers. If he didn't have the power to control mud, even Jua Chi wouldn't dare to sink this deep into the swamp. But now that a harsh bloody chi had penetrated hundreds of meters into the swamp, and easily traveled through the strong dead spirits, continuing to chase Jua Chi down. This terrified Jua Chi. For the first time, he sensed death was coming his way. Frightened, Jua Chi could no longer bother with Shi Yang. He quickly descended into the depths of the swamp. Pop! Shi Yang suddenly rushed out of the mud hole. The mud quickly crushed on top of him, like a heavy mountain. Shi Yang's body was completely engulfed in mud. He couldn't breathe, nor see, and he had to use all of his strength to swim upwards towards the surface. This swamp had a special trait: the harder you struggled, the faster you sank. And even hundreds of meters under the surface of the swamp, that trait still applied. Struggling, Shi Yang felt like he was in a whirlpool of mud. Not only was he unable to escape, but he was also sinking faster. Shi Yang's heart shuddered, and he abruptly stopped his movements. He held in his breath, and stopped moving his body. Lights flashed across his mind, as he hurriedly tried to think of an idea to escape to the surface. In the depths of the swamp, he couldn't breathe or see. And a flow of corpse chi seemed to be corroding his body. In this state, he would soon die from suffocation. Various thoughts flashed through his mind, and suddenly, in the depths of the swamp, he felt the natural yin chi in his vicinity. Once the yin chi appeared, Shi Yang soon sensed the negative powers that he released before. Shi Yang's mind clicked, and he hurriedly circulated the 3 types of powers in his body. In the swamp, a gravitational field made from yin power, profound chi, and negative energy was formed. Once the field was formed, Shi Yang immediately stirred it, and started manipulating the gravitational field to surround himself. His mind was focused on the field, and Shi Yang, very carefully, controlled the field, then making it start to slowly whirl. The 3 powers intertwined together, forming into a massive grinding power. A lot of mud flowed into the field, and, moved by the grinding power of the field, it slowly started to float upwards towards the surface. It really does work. Shi Yang was overjoyed. He immediately put all his focus on controlling the gravitational field. Following the rising motion of the gravitational fields, his body also started to rise towards the surface. Pu. After a minute, suddenly a figure shot out of a muddy area in the swamp. The figure slowly rose up into the sky, flying around 3 meters under the cold moonlight, and then suddenly dropped. "Shi Yang!" Xia Xinyang exclaimed, her hands immediately forming into a lotus seal, and a gigantic aqua-colored lotus flower flew out from her palms, directly stopping under Shi Yang's body. Shi Yang, who was falling towards the swamp, fell on his ass on the icy lotus flower. The lotus flower carried him and flew away from the swamp, stopping by Xia Xinyang's side. Phew! Xia Xinyang lightly breathed out. She put her hands together, taking the form of a worshipper. The lotus flower that carried Shi Yang away from the swamp formed into streams of passing light that entered into the palms of her hands and disappeared bit by bit. "You're hurt." Shi Yang looked at her and frowned. Xia Xinyang's eyes contained signs of exhaustion, and her earlobes, which could be seen outside of her veil, were pale as a sheet. It could be assumed that her entire face must have looked the same. "This is the aftermath of using my reincarnation martial spirit, but it's fine. I already used the nutrition pill from your young family. I will have recovered by tomorrow." Xia Xinyang's expression was cold as she pulled a strand of hair from behind her ears and spoke dismissively. "My young family?" Shi Yang was stunned. He said with a deep voice, "What are you talking about?" Boom, 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 boom. In the distant sky, thundering sounds rang out like earthquakes, and sounded extremely frightening. Shi Yang raised his head to look into the sky. He could see that under the thick clouds, there was an imposing man with a face full of scars who was unyieldingly suspended in midair. By his side appeared 3 giant rivers of thick blood. The 3 blood rivers were each a few thousand meters long, and a few hundred meters wide. They swiftly shifted in the air, showing anyone who saw it a scene they will never forget. The blood in these rivers was thick, and filled with a wicked blood spirit. That man with the ferocious expression stood at the meeting point of the 3 rivers. As if controlling the rivers, his 2 hands twisted and the blood rivers moved at his will. From the looks of it, he was battling with 3 people. Those 1,000-meter-long and 100-meter-wide rivers were like 3 giant blood chains in his hands, driving the 3 people in the sky into difficult positions. Bei Ming Shong, Zhu Zihe, and the mistress of the dark world all threw their sky realm power at the 3 blood rivers, continually defending against the intrusive attacks of the blood rivers. The man controlling the 3 terrifying blood rivers still had enough spare power to cast out slashes of blood light. The blood light fell into the swamps below, forcing Jua Qi in the swamp to flee in panic, having no choice but to dive 1,000 meters deep into the swamp to hide. The man with the face full of scars was multitasking in 4 different ways. He fought with 4 Sky Realm Masters, Bei Ming Shong, the Lord of the Dark World, the Mistress of the Dark World, and Jua Qi, at the same time. And he was still able to gain the upper hand, forcing the 4 masters into awkward positions. Behind the man, giant bats, which were 7 to 8 meters in length, stared out with violent bloodthirsty eyes. On the bats, many cold-faced warriors silently watched the movement above, as if preparing to cut in at any time. "Who is this?" Shi Yang's face was full of shock. This was the first time, after he arrived at Grace Mainland, he met such a frightening warrior. "One of the 3 Shura kings of your young family, Xiao Han Yi. He has a capability of Sky Realm Second Sky. What he cultivates is the evil blood path of the 5 Shura paths." Xia Xinyang's expression was complicated. "My young family?" Shi Yang shook his head. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "You will soon understand." Xia Xinyang said dismissively, and suddenly whistled towards the sky and shouted, "Master Xiao." Shi Yang came out of the swamp, his fine. "You guys go down, and protect young Master Shi." Xiao Han Yi deeply gazed at Shi Yang from the sky. Then a trace of pleasant surprise flashed across his eyes, and he commanded the Shura bloodguards behind him. Just from his gaze, Shi Yang felt chills run down his spine. That man's eyes were like a godly weapon, which could pierce directly into people's souls. It gave him a dominating atmosphere, which was a frightening force of deterrence to others, making them feel, deep down, that they could not contend with him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The cyan blood bats flew down from the sky, and stopped by Shi Yang's side. The 50 Shura blood guards rode on the cyan blood bats, and surrounded Shi Yang. "Young Master Yang." 50 ferocious roars simultaneously came from the warriors on top of the cyan blood bats. 50 Earth or Nirvana realm warriors all looked at him with serious expressions. Shi Yang jumped in surprise. He looked at this parade of warriors with an astonished expression on his face. He had no idea how he suddenly became their young master. Miss Xia, what is going on? Shi Yang was dazed for a moment, and spoke in confusion. Later the Shura king will explain it to you. I'll say no more. Xia Xinyang's pretty brows furrowed, and she spoke indifferently. Shi Yang, what I said to you before, will be cast aside now. I'm sure the Yang family will lay out your future well, I'll stop meddling with it. She meant the thing about making Shi Yang enter the Xia family and employing him into the Three Gods sect as a spy. Shi Yang became even more confused. He didn't know why Xia Xinyang suddenly became so easy to negotiate with. Seeing that Xia Xinyang didn't intend to explain, Shi Yang instinctively looked up at the scar-faced man in the sky. Hey! Just after one glance, Shi Yang couldn't help but exclaim. Up in the sky, Bei Ming Shong became an ice statue, his body wreathed with cold energy, and he quickly flew towards the south. Bei Ming Shong is actually running away. Once Bei Ming Shong left, there was an even greater pressure on the Lord and Mistress of the Dark World. The two didn't stay either, and also quickly flew to the south, afraid to keep fighting with that man. The Lord and Mistress of the Dark World felt a huge pressure, and they didn't dare to separate from Bei Ming Shong when running, scared that if they were to fall behind, they would be killed by that man. Hee. Don't try to run. Xiao Hanyi's expression was as ferocious as a demon. He controlled the 3 terrifying blood rivers, and immediately chased towards the 3. Hey! Kai Xiao exclaimed. He raised his head towards the sky, and shouted, Bei Ming Shong. You could only see that the head of the Bei Ming family was now bleeding through his mouth, and fleeted across the sky in panic. There was even a sign of fluster in his eyes. Behind him, the Lord and Mistress of the Dark World were also full of panic. They fled along, as if being chased by some horrifying monster. Mu Yu Dai and Diya Lan also gazed at the sky in astonishment. They were stunned inside. Not long after, the 2 girls saw the devil-like Xiao Hanyi charge forward, controlling 3 blood rivers. The 2 were lifeless, and all sorts of emotions stirred inside them. Ah! Diya Lan suddenly shouted in surprise. She saw Shi Yang seated on top of one of the cyan blood bats. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.